now that all that Realms Deep shit is over with, now we can do the real podcast. I have been fucking stoked ever since I first heard of you. I think I probably caught something on Dread X's podcast, Real Professionals. They were just, Ted is apparently in love with you, which is great. I think that's fantastic.
We had some fun chats. Yeah, that podcast was fun.
Yeah, and I was like, man, that's so cool. This guy's doing so many different things. Like, you've made music for everything that I've ever liked, pretty much, in some way. Like, you worked with WWE at some point, if I understand correctly.
I did music licensing for a while. I did get, I think, like 28 placements. There was a song used in WWE. There was a song used in like UFC Fight Physics, Major League Baseball, NBA, just a bunch of ramps. I've only a little minute, but then you go look at your cue sheet and then it's like you're under AC/DC and you're like, cool. Like that's badass. I like to be on the same. I know everyone makes fun of them, but I like AC/DC. They do their one thing good. I like it.
They're one of the greatest rock bands of all time. I don't care what anybody says about, all their songs are the same. First of all, that's just not true. All their really popular songs, like on the radio.
That's every band too.
Right.
The deep cuts of every band is where I don't get that about the radio. I don't know if terrestrial radio is the same, but you should be rotating songs in and out. An album is 8 songs. Why are you just playing that one hit for 30 years? Just rotate them out. And that, not to go off on a tangent so early, but I think music journalism in general, I think they don't give enough air to new bands. Like rock journalism, every 10 years you'll get one band. It's like baby metal, and then they'll just focus on that. And then instead of giving people options to choose that they like, they give one band to polarize people about. So people will not like Ghost, even though it's a good band, because that's all they hear about. Yeah. And it's like, well, if you give people 10 options, they'll pick favorites. So I don't know. That's just my thoughts on that. Because there's so many good bands. We're spoiled. Like my technology around me, like I'm spoiled rotten for all the stuff I worked for and, paid for. But the technology we have is insane today as musicians, or anything really. How we're doing a podcast right now is crazy. You used to have to get into a studio together, but it's
a blessing and a curse. I couldn't do what I do currently without being able to connect with people online. That's just not a thing. Without all the technology and the infrastructure that's involved in that, it would pretty much, I can't afford to drive to wherever the fuck you are. And, all these people that I interview in Europe and everything. If I could fly around the world doing interviews and somehow justify the cost.
In 5 years. Start a Patreon and go on tour.
Well, we've got a Patreon, but it's not tour money.
Oh, I didn't even know that. I should join.
You don't have to. You're fine. You being here is more than enough. That's your donation to the show. Don't worry about that.
I said I'd bring the team next time too, and I should. They're just in crunch, working with bugs and QA. We're doing all that stuff right now, so we're in crunch right now. I don't say that negatively either, so don't take it like I'm saying, they have us under the whip. It's like, no, we, as independent game developers, I think crunch is just the mindset of game development because there's always more to add. I think if you're passionate about your game, you're always going to feel under crunch because there's a million ideas you want to get in there. And obviously not all of them are going to make it. You got to cut a lot out.
Some people thrive when the pressure's on. Some people don't. And there becomes a point, obviously, and we see this in not just the AAA game industry, but many industries where that's basically what capitalism and industrialism is taking advantage of people's time and paying them less than what they're worth.
I'd say that's every system of government in history is just how do we retool exploitation in a way that's a little less crappy than the last, but enough that we can get away with. And then that just gets tooled down and down and down.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that if it's something that you're working on that you're passionate about, it doesn't feel like painful to work on it. I feel very passionately about this podcast. So the fact that I had to wake up earlier than I wanted to today to talk to you is a pleasure. It's not
you wake up 2 hours early or something sometimes.
Yeah. Or late, stay up way later than I want to when I know I have to go do obligations the next day. But if I know it's for my passion project, then cool. And I'm sure the same is true for anybody. I'm sure that Da Vinci didn't sleep as much as he wanted to.
He didn't set alarm clocks. That's for sure.
He definitely didn't.
Unless he invented one and tested it. Did he?
He
Probably.
had a rooster like in a box, and it was just like mechanically tuned to let him out in the morning whenever he wanted.
The cuckoo clock of
Yeah. Schrodinger's cock is what it was called. I'm pretty sure if you look through the documents. Anyway,
Schrodinger and Freud had a little collaboration.
what are some of the things that, because we've been chit chatting back and forth a lot lately, but I'm curious with these radio segments and everything. You've been reaching out. I mean, obviously, you've got a bunch of different voice actors. You've got yourself as the radio host. You're programming this essentially to kind of mimic the GTA radio stations, but you're also setting a much darker atmosphere for your world. Like your world and the GTA world, very different. How, like, where did that come from for you? Where did the I don't know, the inspiration to use that medium to create this dark universe that you guys have created?
The story of Scythe actually originated when I was in high school in like 2003 to 2007. I don't remember when exactly, but I wrote this rock opera about a post-apocalypse, kind of inspired by Bad Out of Hell, like the Jim Steinman Meatloaf album trilogy. It's all set in like a kind of a post-apocalypse, and I just liked that music, so I made a 28 song rock opera. And then eventually that just spiraled over years, and I started to release albums with Scythe Saga Records. And that all we were doing with the records was releasing albums and compilations, synthwave mostly, that told a story, like concept albums. And the goal there was to be like, what if Dark Side of the Moon had a sequel made by Deep Purple, and then they had another spin-off made by Judas Priest, and like all these bands just collaborated on this one story, which is what it started as. But the story was just too big for the concept. Like no one understood the stories. We used to write novels and put them with the releases. Mm-hmm. And I took it all down. We started making video games, because when we made video games, it all clicked. Like we had this universe built. It was ready. It's kind of all up here. And me, Caleb, he's been with me since the record label days. And the darkness you're asking about, the inspiration, I guess it's kind of like stuff like 1984 or Brave New World, Animal Farm, just like a dystopian. It's not drawing from any particular one. It's just all of them, essentially. The radio is definitely meant to give a lot of story background on what the player is being put through, right? I guess, without like spoiling anything.
Plot device in a way. It kind of, without you taking time to make a cut scene or make you read a bunch of shit that you don't feel like doing. It keeps the action moving along while also
it's supplemental,
immersing you in the world. Yeah,
you can run right by it, but it's also, there's a lot of comedy in there, so it's like darkly comedic. Like the GTA stuff you were mentioning, those radios were just, and like Saints Row and Postal, all those games have these hilarious radios. Either it's stingers or full-on interviews. GTA would get like Patrice O'Neal and like Danny McBride and Jason Sudeikis, I think was in one of them, and Bill Hader. Just these world-class voice actors. What I was managed to do is get cool new media, is what I call it, like YouTubers, podcasts like yourself, people in the game industry, just friends of ours, really. And it's cool to have that, just like a little niche. You called us all F-list celebrities, which made me crack up, I think. I think it was, you said that the other day. And I'm like, that's exactly, yeah.
You take the F-list celebrities instead of the B-list celebrities.
I noticed didn't you have Duke Nukem read something for you?
Yeah, the beginning of the podcast is John St. John.
I noticed that. I was like, that's awesome.
I didn't plan that. Like, that was never part of the thing. It was just when we interviewed him last year for Realms Deep. At the end of it, he's just like, "Hey, if you guys ever need anything, me to read a line or two, like, let me know." And I was like, "Okay."
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Of course, no problem.
It's iconic.
Yeah,
one of the best characters ever.
I mean, John is just an amazingly nice guy. It's weird how, but not you, John St. John. You're a total asshole.
I am. That is true.
There's too many Johns in this little cloud of people that we work within.
Yeah, I have Shred, so people can just use that and divert from John. I was older when I figured this out, like I think 30 or something. Jonathan is John and Nathan. I wonder if any Jonathans ever just take the Nathan and leave out the John. I feel like we all take the Johns.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I don't know. Nathan doesn't really shorten it up too much. It's like, oh, you just lose
You're
one
cutting a syllable off, not all three.
Yeah, you need to find a way to just like grind Nathan down to one syllable, like Nate. How many Jonathans you just go by Nate? And then you're like, hey, Nate, what's your full name? Jonathan. What? That would catch
Yeah,
people
it's
out.
surprising because it's nothing,
Anyway, we were talking about the game. This always happens. It's fun.
That's the beauty of podcasts.
I guarantee whenever this game is released, people are going to start writing like weird articles trying to find like some political undertone, as you said, like this kind of has an Orwellian sense to it. And I bet you there's going to be like this is a beautiful metaphor for the exploitation of workers and the whatever. And there's some truth to that, I guess, like just from my analysis. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. My whole thing is I'm like kind of anti-political. I feel like everyone's been kind of forced into these weird cults, and a lot of that is the commentary of the game. Is I think our games are escapism, first of all. So I don't want I want everyone to enjoy them. Everyone that plays it should have fun and be able to put themselves in the shoes of the protagonist as they see fit. But our motto is always like be kind to each other, which is just stolen from Bill and Ted. Be excellent to each other, like because that's how we really feel. We should. So my whole thing is, I think we should all be focused on what brings us together. But I mean, I guess that message isn't really apparent in the game. The game is like a triumph over social engineering, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there is some. It's South Park. It's very South Park. The way I like to. They don't take sides. They're on the side of humanity. I feel like in a way.
Yeah, it's satire essentially.
Yeah, it's totally satire. Before memes, there was satire.
I always say that like Matt Parker or Trey Parker and Matt Stone are like the Mark Twain of our
they're geniuses.
generation. Like they're
so
that
genius.
level where they
Book of
they
Mormon,
do something that
America.
Yeah,
like it's all like it all hits. Same thing with Mike Judge. I've been rewatching Silicon Valley. Oh man, that show is phenomenal. And I also got to give a shout out to Mythic Quest. That show is crushing it.
I haven't seen that one.
It's about game developers, and it's by the Always Sunny guys. I don't know how to pronounce Mac's name, but the guy that plays Mac, Rob Mackenhelm or whatever. And,
I've heard
Charlie,
that name.
Yeah. The two of the guys from Always Sunny, and then it's kind of like a crossover with Community in the terms of who's making it. I don't know. It's really good. It's really funny. There's not enough entertainment about game development, in my opinion. Now that I've been in it for a while, it's ripe for the picking to make fun of us.
Yeah, it really depends on like what angle you come at it from. I mean, there was like the movie Indie Game.
I haven't seen that yet, but I've been meaning to watch it. And that the Midway documentary.
Yeah.
Insert coin. Yeah. I'm probably going to rent that pretty soon when I'm done crunching for Burger Farm.
There's just so many different angles you can look at this. People say the industry like a lot, and I mean it is an industry, but it's so, as with anything, there's several different types of ways to look at it. There's like you can go sit at EA's office or Activision's office and look at people working there, or you could look at people like yourself, and that's two totally different work environments.
Yeah, it's almost like an indie band versus a touring band that has a record deal.
Right. There's
these garage bands are practicing in their basement, and they sound just as rocking when you go see them live. So it's pretty cool that there's so much indie games out there. Like the lineup for Realms Deep is insane. I'm looking at all these people posting their games. I'm like, it's just so cool how many cool games are available. You could never stop discuss. Like I was saying about music earlier, you can never stop discovering cool new stuff from people that have complete creative control of their own vision. So you're getting unfiltered art, I guess you could say. They're not getting, and I'll say that too, like we're working with Tiny Build. They have not dampened anything. They've been completely awesome to work with. Like we get to tell every piece of story we want to. They give good notes, don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
I mean, they trust our vision, and I like that about indie gaming. I still like AAA games too, though. Like I like Far Cry, I like every Assassin's Creed for the most part that I play. I just like video games, I guess, in general. I got a Nintendo Switch late last year finally, and I'm catching up on that. I've always loved Nintendo, from my childhood. But what have you played recently? Anything noteworthy? Have you been checking out some of these Realms Deep games, like getting
Yeah, that's what I was going to
codes?
say. I wish I could tell you. I guess because this will air with Realms Deep, I could probably talk about all of it because it'll no longer be like an NDA thing at that point once it's revealed. But I don't want to take a bet on it necessarily and then find out like, oh, they had to drop because it,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But yeah, I've been play testing a bunch of shit that are coming in from Realms Deep mostly. Just like a few highlights was obviously I fucking love your game. I
Oh,
really,
thanks.
really like. I when I first saw this one because it's so different in a lot of ways gameplay wise from previous Scythe Dev stuff. Like basically, you guys have always made like these first person horror games that involve like running, shooting, doing little tasks and everything, but not burger making simulator. So
Yeah, that
that
was
was
Caleb.
interesting. Yeah.
Caleb just designed the whole cooking system, and Blake made this whole restaurant, and then they brought it to me, and it was like ready to go. And they're like, how should we make this scary? They had a few ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb planned out all the scares throughout up until the switch with the simulation, and that was my idea. It was like, how about we make it like this corporation that exists within our universe? And that's what is we're so fortunate in the connected universe of our games, because every time we have an idea, no matter what the subgenre of horror is, um, there's a way that we can fit it into the story where it fits organically. It doesn't seem ham-fisted.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, like, I guess our inspiration in that respect is something like Mortal Kombat, which I think is underrated in its lore because it takes from like kung fu movies and like horror movies, fantasy movies, action adventure,
Yeah.
spy movies. It has like every cool genre, but it all fits and gels so nicely. And I guess Game of Thrones kind of did that too. And there's a lot of stuff that does that, but I don't know. I see like a John Carpenter discography, and I'm like, I wish I could play the universe of these games. And that's
Yes.
kind of like he has a very signature style, and it's just all this great cinematography. And I just like connected stuff. I don't know. I'm just like that.
Isn't it interesting how like you can hear his music and imagine what kind of game it would go well with like
Like Lost
immediately?
Themes,
Yeah, like
those
I
two
could just
albums he released.
immediately like as soon as I hear it, I'm like, I already like he's so good at communicating like a feeling in a universe through his music, and it's probably because he's scored all of his movies, so that's what the music was intended to do anyway.
It impresses me the
Yeah.
most, a guy like him, because that's one of my primary inspirations. Because I get to, I'm not saying I control the story. We all write the story together, but I'm the universe world builder guy. So
Yeah.
like I get the role of writing the story and making the music. So I know exactly what emotion I need to pull in any given scene. And I think that's what makes John Carver. I'm not saying I'm like him, but I'm saying him. I can see how his music always hits exactly like it needs to, like you're saying, because he's the one that wrote it, he's directing it, he knows exactly what needs to serve it, and he isn't showing off. He's making like the perfect, like it's usually just a heartbeat and just like a nice synth pad, and it's always iconic. You go from Halloween to They Live to The Fog, Big Trouble in Little China, Escape from New York. It's like, how does this one guy make Assault on Precinct 13 and then The Thing? It's just awesome. I'm just a really big fan of him. The whole team is. I think Blake's a
we
Wes
could talk
Craven
about
guy.
John Carpenter forever. Seriously, I'm a huge fan of all of his stuff. I just watched Assault on Precinct 13 like maybe a couple weeks ago with my friend who had never
The
seen
ice
it.
cream scene. Oof.
God, I mean, you could that movie was made for television.
Really?
You know what I mean?
Like cigarette burns.
You could never do that now.
No.
You could do a lot of things, but violence on a child, that's like I don't even like that.
Oh yeah.
I respect the fact that at the time, like that was a different culture, a different frame of mind. But I mean, nobody wants to see a little girl get blown away like that. I'm laughing because it's uncomfortable.
They set it up in a way that it was kind of goofy, though. I think.
I mean,
maybe
yeah.
it's the effects in retrospect, but I think they did set it in a way that it wasn't as gratuitous as it could have been. I don't remember if there was like a friggin' like a
no. There's no. You don't
Tom
see
Savini.
her explode. You just see like she looks up, the ice cream cone, and then like the next scene is she's laying on the ground, and you understand that she's dead. But they could have been way worse about it, obviously. But that scene that's the heel turn. That's wrestling right there, where it's like we are
Mhm.
establishing this guy is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you're not supposed to
yeah,
relate to that character. It's like an Eric Cartman.
right.
You're rooting against him. As funny as he
Unfortunately,
is.
some people do. um, as far as like interesting games go, like other than just stuff that I'm specifically testing or playing because they sent it to me, a lot of the stuff in Realms Deep is stuff that I just found and liked.
Where did you
Um,
find most of the games? Are you like one of the main scouts that finds all the games, or
last year I was the guy, and then this year I realized how much bigger it was going to be, and I knew that I wasn't really equipped to just know everything.
Mhm.
So, E1M1 magazine, I knew Zach would be perfect for this. I was like, first meeting we had, Fred was like, okay, so you're going to like find all the games and stuff. And I was like, no, 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 no. Let's bring Zach in. Give me a stooge,
Is
essentially.
it bigger this year? Did last year have this many?
Last year had a lot of stuff going on. But I think this year is definitely going to be bigger in terms of its reach. And also I think there's more games. If I had to go through a list, because we could fit every name of every game on one poster, like in the bottom, like a rock poster. And this year, there's a lot more, a lot
There's
more.
a lot of developers in that group, and
Yeah,
like I said earlier, it's all cool looking games. I'm watching them all come in. I'm like, nice. I can't wait to see some of these.
yeah.
It'll be real
But
exciting.
on my end, a lot of these were people that I already had contact with, or I was already a big fan of their game, and I saw it as an opportunity. Like, hey, let's get involved. We get them involved in Realms Deep and tie the knot, kind of, because that's the whole point of it. That was Fred's vision in the beginning. Is like, take our the few bigger companies that are doing this thing, and then like use that as the backbone of it, but give back to the indie community, give back to all these people that are just out there doing the solo or small dev team thing.
It's
Because
kind of where
that's
they started, right? When
yeah,
they revolutionized the entire industry and invented an entire subgenre of games that's one of the best ever now,
yeah,
It's humbling for us to be even invited. We're just like, wow, like that's the games we grew up with when we were like just like this tall playing on like
yeah.
computers that can't even load the games that are made today now.
I mean, so the first thing I was like, well, I want my game in there, so Call of Ragnar is going to be showing off for sure. And then there's a few others that were like Scald. I was like, if we don't show Scald the Black Priory, I'm not doing it this year. Like that game is just undeniably cool. And if you haven't seen it, it's an 8-bit like RPG adventure game, but
I
it
already like the
has
sound of it.
yeah, you would love it. I mean,
Chiptune
I just
soundtrack.
yeah,
Nice, nice.
very cool. Like very very cool. And that was one of them. Unleash Hell, Foamy's doing that one. It's like a more complex Devil Daggers where you advance through levels. Just stuff like this. Like, how could I not, when I see it, because that's all I do all day is I talk to game developers. So if I have the opportunity to help them advance their stake, and then they remember that later, I mean, all that does is boost us and make us look better too. And it becomes this like give and take,
It's always symbiotic.
synergetic, yeah,
It
thing.
shouldn't be a thing. Shouldn't be. I mean, friendly competition is always good, but if anyone has been in development hell, which to me is again is a byproduct of wanting the best product, it's always going to happen. You will have empathy for every other game developer, and you won't want to see anyone fail. I don't get any. I don't understand wanting to see anyone putting their heart and soul into like a game, wanting to see them fail. I want them all to succeed personally. I have empathy for the situation. It's a lot of work. There's a lot that goes into it. And just to make sure all the moving parts, like a lot of it's not even in the whatever software you're using. You're making all this other stuff and then you have to bring it in, make it all connect. There's a lot that goes into it.
People talk about like, market oversaturation or whatever. Like, boomer shooters is a big part of this community. Obviously, it came from 3D Realms, Duke Nukem Mid Software. Those
We
days,
really
and
want to make one next.
it'd be cool. I mean, but Dave Oshry would be on record being like, if you wanted to make a boomer shooter and make a lot of money, you should have done it like 3 years ago when they
Yeah.
did. And which is whatever. I think it's a pretty substantial genre. There's always going to be little indie games, and then ones that really stand out. Like Postal Brain Damage is going to be fucking awesome. Like that's going to be the best Postal game ever because they outsourced the development to a real dev team. Fuck you, Mike J. And I don't get it. Like, I don't get why there has to be this idea that there's only so many, games that we can have in this genre or in this community before people like stop, being able to pick and choose and buy. Because I really do think that high tide raises all ships. It's
Yeah, and that's how it should be. Instead of let's drain all the water so all the ships lower, and then we're all stuck in the muck. No, it
yeah,
should be. It should always be a process of getting better and bigger and cooler and
because
more
what I've
rad.
seen a lot is when people get into the Realms Deep Discord, they start seeing all these other people that a lot of these guys are working in a vacuum, right? Like they're just in their hole developing
Yeah,
their game. Yeah,
I am. I'll admit it. I didn't
yeah.
know about half these. I didn't know you had a game development. I'm going to ask you to send me a link after we're done so I can check it out.
I'll send you the super duper pre alpha demo
Oh,
if you
okay,
want to.
cool,
But
awesome.
it, I
What
guess
is it?
it's
You want to give me a little rundown on what it is?
Call us
I'm interested.
Ragnar.
Yeah.
Sure, it's a. If you ever played Betrayal at Krondor,
What's that?
okay. Back in the 1900s, there was a game called Betrayal at Krondor, and it was like a very rudimentary sort of kind of open world adventure RPG, first person, in which you go around the land and you find all these like interesting puzzles, like opening up boxes and entering codes and stuff. And it's basically like you find out a little bit more about the story. You meet different characters and that kind of thing, but not like this over the top like go fight a dragon kind of stuff. It's very like atmospheric. So I had Damien and the rest of the Call Us Ragnar team, Tony and Ben, on the podcast to talk about this game because it looked so cool to me, and a lot of people were telling me like this is going to be really, really interesting. So I took a look at it and played the demo and everything, talked to them, and then I just kept coming at them with all these like ideas, like not ideas about change the game, but like what are you doing to market it? What are you doing to do like this and that and all the other thing? And eventually Damien just like, do you want to be the project manager? And I was like, I mean, I have no experience at all, but yeah, sure. Why not?
Experience is trial by fire. There's nothing wrong with that. You get good in that way. It's real life.
I don't know. I mean, I'm still rudimentary in terms of like, am I a game developer? No, I don't know how to write code. I'm not an artist, but am I part of the team in that I am giving all the feedback and connecting them with all the people? And I don't even know how to explain what I do. Project management is weird because it can be a lot of different hats, as you said.
I'd say that was still part of game development. It all is.
Yeah.
Even if you're not writing any code, it's just all so important. That's why it's such an interesting medium, is because you have so many different art styles coming into one. And I think that's why it's currently like the biggest moneymaker. And it's the future of entertainment is stuff that's interactive. That's why media is kind of going over to streamers and YouTubers, and everyone always gives them flack. It's just like, oh, these people playing video games to make a living. It's like, well, but you know how long it takes to build a brand? Like years. Like,
but then you ask that person, what do you do? What do you do for a living? Well, I work at a fast food restaurant.
Something.
Like, so how is that contributing to society exactly? And how happy are you to be?
Well, it is too. I mean, I would never. I've worked in fast food. It's part of the inspiration. Me and I know Blake's worked in fast food as well. People kind of underestimate what goes into a kitchen. It is tough work. It's very intense.
I'm not diminishing working in a kitchen.
Oh no, I know.
How is that? How are you any better than somebody who's a content creator? There's a hack in every industry, right? Like there's always going to be these people that are, in my opinion, like, oh, this is kind of soulless, That's
some
not
people
what
want solace,
Yeah.
I think right now the problem is there's too much like irony. I kind of miss sincere artistic expression that isn't some punchline or like I think people are kind of chicken shit. Like they're too scared to be honest. Like make something you actually believe in. Why has it got to be some snarky joke all the time? Like you can break character. I sincerely urge you to break character at least once and say something real. It doesn't all have to be a meme, I guess. I don't know.
You gotta break the fourth wall, so to speak.
You got to nuke the fifth wall and question the existence of a sixth.
It's I don't know. It's just an interesting thing. I mean, I have no practical usefulness in terms of making a game. All I know is like, okay, let me look at your Patreon, and then the first thing I did was like, I'm going to fix this in such a way that you get more money.
Marketing's an art
Yeah.
form all in of itself.
Yeah.
It's
And
it's not easy either. That's another thing. It takes hours of time a week. That's why
it's
big companies hire people to be community managers, and
a whole thing for sure.
yeah,
Like,
even for like a platform, if you're big enough, you need someone just to run your Discord. And that person is just as important as some of the people writing press releases, or
it's a tree falls in a forest kind of thing. If there's no one else around to hear it, then maybe it did fall and it probably did make a sound, but no one heard it, so they're not going to buy it, the tree.
if it crushed an entire family of chipmunks, then no one was alive to realize or something.
Yeah.
We're getting all animals of farthing woods with it, or Watership
We're
Down.
really getting in the woods with this whole conversation. This is cool. I love when it just like devolves into like anything but what we set out to do. Like that's my favorite part of a podcast, is that you get to look at the actual psychology of a person instead of just like their, let me tell you about buying my game, which you've been very kind about, because you really are not turning the conversation back around to yourself. I'm going to have to do that.
Feel free.
I mean, it's cool. I love having a tangential conversation. Do not get me wrong. But I do want to sell your game to people. So what was the genesis of this fast food game? I know that you mentioned, was this Caleb's idea to begin with?
Yeah.
Let's do a fast food simulator.
Yeah, that was always them wanting to make a simulation game. They like systems a lot, like interactive systems, money systems, that kind of stuff. I'm sure it's fun to design. But Caleb, he does, art and music, and he does 100 different things too. But since he's gotten into coding, because we made a bunch of games before Northbury Grove that we just abandoned, like a good 20. So I don't know, maybe some people are like, whoa, their first game went viral. It's like, no, our 20th game went viral after we failed to finish the first 19.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That's what you should do. But we had like a Papers, Please inspired type, like a border control type game. We had like a overhead GTA 2 style game that was really cool called Order of the Impaled. The Spectre City slasher game. Originally, it was going to be kind of Hotline Miami, and you play as the slasher. And then we moved to Unity because we were working on Construct games. So I don't know. I don't know what inspired him to make fast food, but beyond just wanting to do a simulation, I guess.
I mean, it's a perfect metaphor for kind of what you guys are going with. That wake up at night, drive to work, do the thing, and then you kind of get into a rhythm. And as you get into the rhythm, that's the perfect time to start introducing wrenches in the system. Like well, what would happen if we did this? And it becomes really progressively uncomfortable. Just the demo alone, like it really did that. It was like, okay, I'm doing this.
Or Barn?
The one where you're working in the fast food restaurant. I don't know which one.
There was one on itch.io called Burger Barn, and then there was the alpha on Steam. And
whatever the one that was on Steam is, I believe, the one that I played originally.
Okay, that was the alpha. That was Farm, because there was a Barn before Farm, but they're all canonical. So like, you should play all three, because it's not like the alpha isn't, that actually happened, and the full game is a sequel to both of those. So it's kind of a little trilogy, if you will.
That's interesting.
We revamped from the alpha entirely. The whole city was reconstructed. There's a whole new apartment. I think they changed the entire. Yeah, the restaurant's completely different, new layout. But I mean, spoiler if you haven't played the game, I'll give you a time. They upgraded the simulation. I mean, if you've played the first two, that's what's going on. So basically, you're in a new simulation. You're a new person. You're a new test subject.
I just mean structurally, the act of doing a routine set of tasks repeatedly, and then throwing these little bits of like, okay, well, something wrong happened here, or like like who keeps shutting out the power, and then you you walk around one day, and then there's this like weird fucked up thing going on with one of the mascots. And that's a really good way of kind of slowly introducing the universe and the horror to you, as opposed to just, you're standing there one day and like Freddy Fazbear is like, "Hey, I'm coming to kill you," like or whatever. It's not the same thing.
I think big difference is we had the lore developed, like I was saying earlier.
Yeah,
So everything, like the underlying story that I don't even know if people are going to figure out. It's going to take another 10 games to really reveal. But if people are paying attention now, they're going to notice the big and they're going to know the big twist that's going to happen 5 to 10 games from now and change the entire state of our world, I guess you could say. There's big things that are planned to happen. And if you go back to the record label and look at the album titles and song titles, you kind of get an idea of where it's headed. But the slow ramp up, like you're saying, isn't just this game. It's like the entire. We're doing a prequel to the story that this originated as. Basically, that's what it's always been. We're building up to something big, and what that big thing is going to be really cool. I think people that have played even more than like 1 or 2 games or more from our series will be blown away by the reveal. It's ready to be revealed. It's not like we're gonna rush the end season 8 and drop off all the cool stuff we built up and just be like, no, that was subversion. Like, no, everything's built up to like a really well-defined ending. Or I don't even know if it's an ending, but I don't know. I probably sound like a crazy nonsensical person right now, but there's a cool underlying twist behind everything.
So there's been this interesting segment, like a kind of an ongoing series on the Loser podcast where they explore the different characters of your universe. And like the Loser podcast is really interesting because like I do really long form interview kind of stuff, and they have a totally different thing going on. And I love the fact that the medium is not just like one thing. There's like your Joe Rogan style shit, and there's your hardcore history kind of stuff, and then there's like what he's doing, which is totally awesome.
Deep lore dives type stuff.
But
he's really cool too.
Bite-sized chunks. You know what I mean? Like it's a podcast that doesn't require you to sit, continually either sit in front of a screen for 3 hours or like have it in your pocket while you're taking a jog and pause and start up again and kind of re-get into it. It's a diverse, I don't even know what to call podcasting art form, maybe.
Yeah, it is. I'd say it's replacing radio for the most part.
But anyway,
it's a whole new. Sorry, good.
No, point being that his dive into your universe is like just a little snippet, of what is a really, really crazily well thought out. I don't even know how much you guys plan it necessarily, and you can elaborate on that. But such a cool. It's almost like the Marvel universe. I don't really like Marvel that much, but you know what I mean? Like where you're building.
I'm not a big fan of the MCU either, but you're right in that. Like I respect the hell out of how much care they put into everything connecting. Yeah. And like I don't go out of my way to watch their movies, but when one is on, I'm always entertained to the point like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. I'm like surprisingly like, oh that was a nice waste of an hour and a half. But in the same fashion, like yeah, everything we do is connected. If you go back to Northbury Grove, you'll see like posters of people that are influencing the story of Burger Farm, which is now 10 games ahead. It's not necessary to play them all, but the more you play, the more enriched your experience is. Like even our 2 Dread X games, if you were only to play one of those, you wouldn't get the whole scope. And then if you were not to play those in conjunction with all the rest, you wouldn't get obviously the whole picture to an even deeper extent. But
it's like the Tarantino films, where you have these recurring families and like brands, like the Red Apple cigarettes is probably the
Big Kahuna Burger or whatever. Yeah.
Big Kahuna Burger.
Or Kevin Smith does that. The View Askew stuff is all kind of connected, I think.
Yeah. And the Vega brothers too. Like, in Reservoir Dogs, you have, what's his name? Vinny. And then
I haven't looked into that. Now I'm really intrigued to go look that up because if all his movies are connected, that's really badass.
It goes deep, man. Like you have to look for it though. It's just like what you're saying. Like, the more you watch, the more you notice. Like
that's important to us is that we don't want everyone to feel obligated to play all the games, but we also want to reward the people who do play it very heavily. Like there's people on our Discord that are like, I think this is what's happening. And I'm like, oh crap, they're like 7 games ahead. They actually know exactly where we're going. So that gives me confidence that the story is being explained in a way that people can follow. But at the same time, some people are like, what the fuck is going on? I have no fucking idea what the hell the story is. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how much more story I can shove in your face. Like there's over an hour of talk radio and Happy's Humble Burger Farm. There's over an hour of TV programming, all stuff we made, hired a lot of it out, had some help, like all the mercenaries have been a big help. I don't know. I just want to reward. I like stuff like that. Like I see a series like Mortal Kombat. I always go back to them because of the different genres that they're mixing together. I want to see more of those side games like Shaolin Monks and like I remember Sub-Zero Mythology. Was that what it's called? That Sub-Zero game. Yeah. There was some Sub-Zero game that came out and it was like a platformer, but it was so fucking hard and everyone hated it. And it was, I don't know, it was ambitious as fuck, and I respect what they did with that. I want more stuff like that. Like I want an open world Mortal Kombat that's on the scale of like a Far Cry or a Assassin's Creed. Like imagine an Assassin's Creed type game, but meets Mortal Kombat where you're going through they have different realms. That could be the next Game of Thrones too. Like I'm a big fan of that franchise, but a lot of games are like that. A lot of games have that really big, like Game of Thrones could be an excellent, or Lord of the Rings. They could pull from Tolkien's works and just make all these games. And I just like big universes like that. I'm a big fan of world building. Star Wars, George Lucas just takes friggin' Western movies, puts them in space, adds a little bit of samurai, and you've got like this cool new thing that it's pulpy, but it's unique. I don't know. I like investment.
George Lucas is the Kiss of movies, you know what I mean? Like where he understood that this is a film franchise that can be turned into a lot of other things. And you were talking about like Lord of the Rings with video games. Like there's only so much you can do legally as far as like,
yeah, unfortunately,
you know what I mean? Like somebody owns the IP to this. I assume the Tolkien family and then a few different, film and.
But like Shadows of Mordor and Shadows of War, I think was the second one. Those are fantastic games. And Star Wars obviously has had a long history of great games. Like Shadows of the Empire was one of my favorites when I was a kid. Rogue Squadron, all that
Knights
stuff.
of the Old Republic was mine. That was like
was didn't that eventually lead into those guys making Mass Effect? Wasn't it that the same? I think it was the same people, right?
I'm not gonna say that I know that piece of information, but maybe, yeah. We can consult the Oracle if you want, but
that's another fantastic giant universe, Mass Effect. I'm replaying the Legendary Edition right now. It's just so incredible how much detail. So that's like kind of, the inspiration for our universe is that it's not rooted in modern days. That's why we set it on the planet Scythe in our own universe. We don't want to be bogged down by the baggage of our existence or escapism. We want people to have fantasy adventures. Well, usually it's like experiencing a horror movie and getting chased by someone that's trying to stab you. But hey, for some people, that's fun. It's like riding a roller coaster. People like being scared. It keeps us. I think it keeps us intact with our instincts that kept us alive, and when we needed to do that.
I was talking to Damien from Call of Ragnar the other day about this exact thing, where it's like, because he's like a very chilled out dude. He does not like horror so much. He's just not into he's like, the world's awful enough. I don't need any more of that. And I'm like,
that's totally valid too. Yeah.
And then, but my response to that was like, well, yeah, but for some people, like thrill seeking and horror is calming, right? Like death metal to some people, black metal for me, like that. I don't know why. It doesn't make any like logical sense, but that calms me down. It has like the opposite effect on me than it does on you.
Yeah, I love metal too. So yeah, I totally like thrash metal though. Is where I go with the heavy stuff. But I like black and death metal as well. I love metal in general. It's just so cool. So many different odds and ends.
But so do you want these people who enjoy that or are calmed by that stuff? Do you want them just like roaming the streets, without any outlet? That's what I was saying. Like, don't get rid of the baby with the bathwater. Like, you may not want to listen to this, or you may not want to play a game that's about being chased by a psycho. But the people who do need that, we don't want them to not have it.
That's
Yeah.
actually the whole Senile Showdown
Mm.
cameo. Spoiler alert that you have the whole segment's about. We had this game that was a goofy beat 'em up. It was like a first person beat 'em up where you're an old person escaping an old folks home fighting off
Hmm.
older orderlies. And we did this whole segment about violence in video games. And one of the characters we have that recurs is brought in. He's just ranting. It's just me. It's just some guy voicing my thoughts, exaggerated in a Bill Burr fashion or a Doug Stanhope, a Patrice O'Neill, like just club comic-y, South Parky satire. But basically, it's saying, why would you think video games cause violence? If anything, that's probably where people uh, vent all their frustrations. I'm going to go murder some people in Call of Duty rather than doing something horrible in real life, like kicking my dog or something, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, I never got the impression that video games would inspire violence unless that person was already prone to it. Not
It's
that
the
I'm a
human.
psychologist,
It's
but
the human equivalent of like when your dog, right? If your dog's like really over active, hyperactive, that and most people are going to tell you like, well, you need to run them. You need to go help them get their energy out because if you don't, then if you keep a big dog locked up in a house all day, they're going to exert that natural need to get that energy out in some way that may not be desirable. Um, sports, right? Contact sports, football, American football in particular, is simulated warfare. This was literally that sport came from a lull in war for Americans. Like we didn't have any good wars to go fight, so we need to take all these young men and get them out there and exert that energy and get that violence out of them in a
it's funny you say that
safe way.
because aspects of it, like I was saying, some aspects and tenets of all these different forms of authority, I do agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking in my head when I was saying that how much being on a football team was like, oh, I'm sure this is just like the military, like how they make you do. No, obviously not as intense, but for a kid in 8th grade, 6th grade, I was glad I did the football for a year. I quit in high school because I wanted to play guitar and I was afraid I'd fuck up my arm or something. But
Yep.
uh, the one year I played, I think it was really good. My dad was cool too, though. He made us work as kids, like do yard work and shit, and installed a good work ethic, which has paid off for all the video games. My whole team, we're all workaholics in a way. We're
Yeah.
always trying to do more, and that's something that you need to find with game development. You need to find people on the same wavelength as you. Like, so if you're a lackadaisical developer, you shouldn't work with people psychos like me and my team, because I made like 15 albums for this game, 15 albums worth of music, an hour of TV and an hour of talk radio. I'm not saying it's all good, but it's all there. And I put as much effort as I could into it. And I didn't need to. It's not like this game needs an hour of that. But I want as much content for people to enjoy as possible.
Yeah, I relate to that completely. I'm definitely like the sort of psycho workaholic where just I will
It's
push
fun.
myself way too hard, and then the people around me are like, "Man, you were really grinding on that podcast thing." I'm like, "Well, it means a lot to me, so why would I not?" I get that though. Yeah, it's. I think that's how we started the whole conversation in general. Was just that's what you do. That's what makes you. I mean, that's what got you the recognition you're at. If you guys weren't producing at the rate that you are, then you would be way far behind on getting to this big reveal you're talking about, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. We Since we abandoned so many games, it was nice because we got to a fever pitch. We had finished like a few games. Like we had a game set where this game is set, ironically, that we abandoned. And there's actually on YouTube, there's footage of it still, where it's a first person shooter on the same island and you're fighting mutants. And I don't know, it came to a point where like we need to finish the next thing. Like we can't, like we've abandoned enough games. We had a fighting game, a shooting game, a futuristic city game. We just kept abandoning them, and it's like, all right, this is enough. And then that was Northbury Grove, and it just so happened to pick up. But like you were saying, like we continued to pump games out. So we did Northbury Grove, King's Comfort. We did in a month afterwards. We did Walls Closing In. Took us like a year. That one was a tough development. And then Entity was like 2 weeks. But yeah, we just kept making games. Like we made a bunch of prototypes, essentially. Short 1 hour, more like movies. than anything. Because really long games are a lot tougher to develop, obviously. We worked within our limitations, for sure.
But I don't know. I mean, how much could you really expect to be output by 3 people? If you were to like total it up like it were a business, and then take it and look at what you guys do, like how many hours you put in, how much effort you put in, all that stuff, and then what you've turned out from it, it wouldn't make any sense. Like, it would seem like there's not enough time in the day for you to possibly do what you guys have done, and that you guys are psychos. Like,
yeah, definitely,
you'd have to be. You don't even have to like play the games that are like also already kind of fucked up and horrific to understand like these guys are crazy. Like, but
I don't disagree.
Do you find it frustrating? I know you kind of said something about this earlier, but do you find it frustrating to work with people who don't put in the same amount of effort or like don't have that same drive? I guess would be a better point of view.
If they're not like a lot of it's just respect. Like, I can respect someone's slower work ethic, but if it's to a point where you think I'm an idiot and you're just going to keep taking advantage, I know what you're doing. Like, there's, like I was saying earlier, we're so spoiled. There's like no excuse if you are in the circumstances of living where you're able to procure like the equipment you need and have a good job to do it. And I'm not like discounting how important like having the right stuff is, but if you have that stuff, there's no excuse not to put your effort in. You should be wanting to put all your effort in. So I do clash if someone is clearly just isn't invested. Like, it's offensive almost. It's insulting more so. I'm insulted if you see me putting out hours of music and you're like doing one little system. That's like, that's totally fine, but don't talk down to me, I guess. And I'm not going to talk down to anyone. I don't know. It's all about meeting in the middle. It's all about compromise. Everyone should have empathy for what the other person is doing.
That's or going through. Thing. I think in terms of like how much time you can put in, it was like, well, what, do they have a day job? Do they have a spouse or kids or
college or all these other things that are important, or a relationship, if they're getting married, if they're having kids, moving into a new house? There's a lot of stuff. Like I said, it's all down to the respect. Like, if you have stuff going on, like, that always comes first. Like I said, it's just if someone's trying to screw you, really. And I'm not saying that ever happened to us, but I've been in bands, and I'm kind of thinking of some of my bands where, people wouldn't go to practice and we're trying to get ready for a tour and they're just not putting it in any effort in. That kind of screws the whole team, And touring it's a very similar thing, actually. Game development and bands. It's a very similar brotherhood or sisterhood or family, whatever.
When you get into like
call it
publishing rights and revenue, that's a whole different story too, because then there's always going to be that debate with like, well, do we, there's 5 members in this band, we should all be paid equally. Even though there's one guy who's like, well, I did a lot more than you did. I wrote all the songs and I did all the merch and all that, and that could be a whole thing in itself.
Yeah, that's totally true. Like I said, though, Caleb and Blake are like me. They're psychos, and we're all learning new skills to make the game happen. Everyone's putting in their best effort in every field they have, but we're at a point where we need more people. And like, just like you did for this year of Realms Deep, you need a bigger team at some point. You can't do everything yourself. And it's only going to be better if you bring in other people, and it's giving another person an opportunity and a job, some income for a little while.
It really just comes down to like, that's right. Like, I have to set my limit somewhere. Like, there's only so much I can put into. There's only there's a number for this. There's like an actual psychological term for this, and I don't remember what it is, but you can only keep track of so many different people or things, right? Mm-hmm. It's like we're programmed to live in like small communities where you kind of know everybody and you can, reasonably retain information about them so that you can interact. So there's only, I can take care of maybe 20 or 30 games at a time where I can just recall right off the top of my head. When that number starts getting up to like 80 something, like, yeah, I can't do this. And I only have so much time in the day to really think about it. And then with you guys, it's like people are messaging, like asking questions, can I do this? Can I do that? When's the deadline? And all this. I'm not going to spend all day long just replying to messages,
Yeah.
There's
only finite time.
Yeah.
But that's why only I'm available, because everyone else is doing the technical stuff and, making sure everything is held together. I'm just making all the fluff to sit around when you're hitting the bowl. Like, hey, I watch my TV programming.
But I mean, there's value in that too.
I'm just
being available to do press is just as important as anything
definitely
else.
That's what I was telling you earlier. Marketing is definitely an aspect of game development. I mean, it has to encapsulate what you're selling, and not like those like weird Twitter or social media ads. It's like Mafia City. And it's like none of this is in the game. This is all just CGI, and then the gameplay is completely different. You're just hooking me with this weird meme, like surrealist. You know what I'm talking about? Those games, like the apps that show you gameplay that isn't in the game.
Yep.
It's a whole genre of game. It's kind of like that Elsa Gate shit. Just weird internet stuff. I think it's AI. I mean, do you want to get into that? How robots are going to kill us all?
You can talk about whatever you want, man.
In the next 5 to 10 years. That was one of my theories. The passive aggressive apocalypse, that machines are intentionally just working at like 80% efficiency, so that 20% of the time they mess up, they're driving humans insane, so that eventually we all kill each other. Passive aggressive apocalypse theory. It's like Skynet, but it's just like it's like if instead of Arnold, it's just someone that's really passive. It's like, yeah, he shouldn't talk to you like that, and then passive aggressive apocalypse.
I mean, if you think about machines as potentially living organisms, like right now they started off in like the same way as anything else, like this single-celled little organisms that were just like, rudimentary calculators and computers and things. Slowly over time they evolve and they become more and more complex, just like we did.
Just like images, like to put it encapsulate, like a JPEG of Mario, it has more data than the entire Nintendo cartridge.
Yep.
Just a picture of it on your computer. That's how much it's gone from a single cell organism, like you're saying.
They're slowly using us, like not intentionally, but as you like passive aggressively. They're becoming part of us. They're like using definitely. Our bodies to continue to evolve themselves, and they're programming us to be more and more dependent on them to the point where we can't survive without. I mean, like go find a fucking 16-year-old girl and take her cell phone away. I dare you.
Yeah. I never thought of it like that, but like the parasitic nature.
I wouldn't even say parasitic. I mean, it's symbiotic. We're gaining a lot from it to some extent, but
we're kind of like cyborgs, or we're kind of like in a hive mind at this point.
You and I are talking through a computer right now.
Yeah.
We're staring at a webcam.
The only thing that makes us non-cybernetic is it's not attached. Like if we had our cell phones attached,
Yeah. But those headphones look mighty fine on your head, man. Might as well just have them on all the time.
In a face mask permanently.
Yeah. I don't know. You're totally onto something there, because it's a very real thing that is like, it happens slowly enough that we don't really notice it. But you talk to go talk to your grandma, like,
this if the internet went down, the world would fucking like at the end of Escape from New York or Escape from LA, I forget which one. Spoilers. When he's like, Snake, you'll put us back to the Stone Age. Back then, it wasn't even comparable to what would happen now, because it has to be at least half of the population makes their income primarily from the internet. Yeah,
it would probably destroy the economy. Not
the
just
entire infrastructure of everything would just shut down. Like that. There was that one Die Hard movie where that's what they were like digital terrorists, and like they like shut down the grid and all these cars are crashing. Like, oh shit, that's a cool movie.
That's the idea behind like cloud servers, is that or Bitcoin even, is that if your system fails, it's still saved over here across the world, and several different other systems that kind of prevents a failsafe. But if like that solar flare happens that just simultaneously kills everything on the planet in terms of then everything would crash. That we'd be right back to just hammering rocks or whatever with another rock, I think. I mean,
That's why I don't get all the anarchists. Like, why would you want anarchy? I don't want anarchy. Like to think that that would be a better way of life. It'd be like, oh no, like in an anarchy, like you don't get canceled, you just get murdered and they take your bread. Like, I don't want that. Like, I like what we have now. It's just, I feel like the media is the main thing responsible. Because, like, if you looked at statistics of like crime and homicide and all this violence and everything, everyone was getting nicer from like the 80s to like 2010. And then I haven't seen data from 2010 to 2020, but uh you never heard about it. It wasn't like we didn't get blasted over the head every day with, like the opposite of fear propaganda. We like fear mongering, the opposite. Like everything's getting better. Like we're actually nicer. Like I don't understand why no one knew that for so long. And it's just like that's kind of a big, like you were asking if the game is political. I'd say that's the only really thing I'll say I actively was making fun of media and how it turns everyone against each other. Like I don't understand why people aren't friendlier. Like you said, we're talking through the computer. Like we can all communicate. There's no reason we should be getting less civilized. We should be getting along more. And I think just like I said, the media is just, it's not working in the interests of the people. That's for sure.
I have a tendency to kind of romanticize like pre-agricultural humanity. Like,
Feudal
not that I think it
systems.
would necessarily be better than the standards of living we have now or whatever, but just this, again, like living in a small town to me, way better, way infinitely better than living in a giant, like fucking,
Metropolis.
yeah, infinitely, because people value each other more. They can remember each other, like,
I've got a microcosm for you that is actually when I was touring in bands, I played hippie festivals, and
yeah,
some of the festivals we played are big, and then some of them were small. And I always liked the small festivals more because it was like 100 people versus 3,000, and then you meet all 100 people by the end of the weekend. It's like, oh, cool, it's a little family. And then like these bigger festivals, just like 10,000. You're not even going to remember the weekend. It just goes by in a blast. It's like just so crazy, and
right.
that little community for the weekend. I like the little ones.
And when you meet, a familiar face that you actually remember, I mean, what's the worst thing that happens is when you have a really important to you conversation with somebody or a meeting with someone, and then you feel like you're really connected, and then like you meet them years later and they're like, I don't remember anything. Like,
If
it's
they're a
not the,
stoner, you can be like, yeah,
yeah.
maybe they just need a little reminder. Like it depends. Like as someone that went on tour and stuff, I've met like hundreds of people and had hundreds of those conversations. So it's just like sometimes I do need a little kickstart and like, oh, okay, yeah, fuck, I remember now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it makes you rude or whatever. I'm just talking about that finite number of people that you can deal with. Like, if it really meant a lot to the other person, and then they realize that, like, it can feel like you're saying, "Oh, you weren't important enough to me to remember." Not that you mean that, and I don't think anyone has that thought about you in particular. Just that's a point of proof of what I'm talking about.
See, I'm better at that, like remembering that shit, but I'm bad with names. I fucking forget names, but I'll remember. Like, oh, we saw fucking Max Creek that year at Strange Creek in 2013 and raged, and then had a jam session at the campsite. That was sick. And then got in a car accident with a deer or whatever. No, it doesn't have to be that crazy.
Yeah, that's definitely one of those things about tragedies in general that like people band together, like post 9/11 America. Suddenly, everybody was cooperating very quickly.
Well, do you remember where you were? I remember exactly where I was.
I was in first grade, and my teacher, came in with a TV and put the news on and explained to us what was going on. And my mom was pissed because, like, maybe that's not the best thing to tell a first grader, is that like our country's being attacked right now in real time. Yeah.
I was in 7th grade. They made us go to homeroom, and I remember what I asked. I raised my hand. I'm like, is this as bad as Pearl Harbor? And the teacher was like, wow, that's a really good question. And then I forgot what he answered. All I remember is he said it was a good answer. I think he said we're going to need time to see. And yeah, I don't know. Was it worse? It's actually debatable. It's still up in the air.
Yeah, you could have a whole like dissertation on, you know, what were the political ramifications of each thing, and what were the societal ramifications of each thing, and then or you could just start talking about death toll, but then you'd have to extrapolate, like, okay, how many deaths did 9/11 directly cause? You know, on the ground, like the day of the attack, certainly a lot of people.
Or
But if you compare
civilians
that,
versus soldiers type
yeah.
shit, because people think you're more dispensable for some reason.
But if you want to go with Pearl Harbor, then there's like several years of like basically uncontrolled warfare with Japan that resulted from that. Not to mention that also caused us to become involved in the, you know, European front. And then you total up all those numbers of people who died, and then you total up all the numbers of people who died in the Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks, and even before that, the fire bombings in Tokyo and Dresden and everything. Like, man, you know, you'll never know the answer to that question, which one was worse. But
that's why I don't get why everyone's always just like, I prefer this system of government. It's like, well, why don't you just take the good aspects from all of them and make new stuff? Like, why are we so fixated on this is wrong, this is right? It's like, no, this behavior is wrong. This action is wrong. It's not really. I'm not an anti anything except extremist. I think any ideology, any root ideology is fine as long as the person wielding it is amicable. If you cannot have a amicable conversation with someone that's on the other side, you have become evangelist on whatever your extremist thoughts are. You now think this person is a heretic for thinking slightly different. And I see this a lot. I see it in things like even music taste. It's like everyone has become so polarized. It's like, we don't have
that's
to be
not
enemies.
Metal. That band fucking sucks.
Something like that. Yeah. I think punk's the worst. Punk, I've never seen a genre that is just so like, it's just so totalitarian. It's like everyone has to think exact. You're not punk, but you're saying with the metal stuff. I've gotten shit for like listening to Iron Maiden from more of the death metal kids, and I'm just like, well, I like death metal. I mean, what's wrong with Maiden? It's just prog rock that's a little heavier. It just makes me laugh. I don't care if you don't like Iron Maiden or a band I love like Deep Purple. I didn't write their music. Why am I going to care? I don't have if you make fun of my music, even I'll just be like, okay, like, I totally respect your difference of opinion. Not everyone's going to like it. It's cheesy.
There's something very American about that argument, because like if you go to European music festivals and look at the lineups of them, they're very diverse. Like, you know, you could have Iron Maiden and Deep Purple on the same card as like Slayer and Cannibal Corpse and like Thy Art Is Murder or whatever. Like they could all just be like right next to each other. And American tours in general, and especially in our festivals, we try to like compartmentalize things into like one particular genre. You end up with stuff like Lollapalooza and Coachella too. Yeah.
Those festivals I went to in the hippie scene were good because the jam band scene was kind of like the offset of the hippies and jam band, Grateful Dead, Allman Brothers. You could go everything from hip hop to funk to electronic music, dubstep, psytrance, some metal bands. My band was kind of like a prog rocky. You're kind of like, I don't know, some people said we sounded Zappa-y, but
I love Zappa.
Yeah, he's insane. He should have been president. But what I was saying earlier, I agree with you in that what I was saying earlier about music journalism or like just the mainstream. It's just like we're only given like 20 to 30 bands in any particular genre, and that's it. It's like there's so much music. Why do we have to hear about this one person over and over and over again and just them? And it's like they're 30 years into being on the top of the charts. It's like, I'm so sick of this same artist. Well, give us some more choices and I wouldn't be sick of that person. I'd probably like them. That's kind of my point. Like a Greta Van Fleet, like they're good musicians. The only reason that anyone shits on them is because that's the only option they get. There was like 4 other bands that, you know what I mean? Like give people options and they'll pick what they like. They won't pick to like or hate something. They'll gravitate towards what they want.
I mean, I don't even know anybody within our kind of generational age group who still really listens to terrestrial radio anyway. I mean, most people just go on the internet and find the music they like. And
yeah, but I'm talking about Spotify and shit because it's all rigged. It's entire music genres have come up out of just buying fake likes and then hitting the charts, and now all of a sudden you have faked your way into success. It's happened. It happened with dubstep when it was blowing up, and I've produced dubstep, so I'm not trashing the genre. I actually really like it, but at that time, Facebook actually was a viable means of marketing, and
MySpace. That's
It
what
was after MySpace, but it was
okay.
when Facebook was still relevant. Like you didn't need to pay to market, and like all these people, all these big dubstep artists had millions of fans in the same city in the same country, and everyone's like, "Ah, you cheated!" So they hit the charts. It was like that title scandal with Jay-Z. He owns a streaming service, and he was falsifying millions of plays for himself, his wife, and Drake. Why did they need more recognition? We're already getting them shoved down our throats. Like, why don't you spread the love? But I will say, Tidal apparently pays the highest in percentage, probably because he's putting it right back into his own pocket. But it's just like, why do you need to rig the game anymore? It should be like streaming is fleecing artists. Like it made me crack up so hard when all those people that work at Spotify are like, God, cancel Joe Rogan's podcast. Well, you haven't fought for the rights of me earning actual good money off my hundreds of songs on there, you assholes. You're not fighting for my stream and royalties rights. You just want to get this guy brought off the friggin' platform. There's thousands of artists that should be getting a higher percentage of their royalties, you know?
Well, that's like we were talking about marketing earlier. It's exactly the same thing. People don't, we use the word buy, but engage, I should say, based on their logical thought.
It's emotional.
Like,
yeah.
Zero, like proven fact. People don't think about what they do when it comes to like how they consume things. It is almost always about their emotions and what it invokes in them, and that's what makes people activists. That's what makes people do all kinds of things. There are definitely some people who are like really deeply thinking about what they're doing before they do it, and that's an art form. That's like a years of meditation, Buddhist monk kind of skill to learn.
Enlightenment type stuff.
I'm not saying I'm enlightened, and there's certainly a lot of emotion attached to it. But part of what this podcast is like to try to make people think about their purchases in the gaming industry before they just throw their money.
I've just lost us all our sales.
Yeah, like why do you spend $70 on like this soulless piece of shit that was just, and the only reason you're buying it is because it was marketed to you in the perfect way, when you could be throwing all that. You could spend $70 and get like most of the Scythe Dev Team collection and have a whole universe to explore and not feel like you just supported an industry that's like exploiting people, because
we gave out most of our games.
Yeah,
they're mostly free on itch.io.
And
like that benefited. Like we went viral like a lot of big streamers played our first game like right off the bat, and like we didn't go viral again, like right away. King's Comfort didn't get hit up by a bunch of numbers. We kept going, but we released all those for free because we want people to have fun playing horror games. We wanted to give to the indie game dev community. Of course, we wanted to be successful. Like it worked out for us eventually. We never intended to get published. The people just came to us and things worked out. DreadX Collection 1 and 2 was a real fun to work on. And
if it weren't for DreadX and like Northbury Grove and stuff that I played for little to no money, when I heard about Happy's Humble Burger Farm, if I didn't already know Scythe Dev Team, I probably wouldn't have been interested in it. Like, I don't want to play a burger simulator. That sounds dumb. But because I know who's working on it, because I've played a lot of your shit, I was like, oh, damn. Like, that's going to be interesting. There's no way that can't be. So you built a brand around it too.
Yeah, the gameplay loop is so past just cooking that it's very interesting. I think it's a
but you understand that
style.
When people just browse through games and they're like, what is that?
Well, it's like the same thing I was saying with streamers. They had to build up a brand. Like people aren't just, oh, I want to watch this video game. It's like, no, I want to watch this particular person play it because they have charisma and they built their own thing.
Again, it's like an emotional attachment thing. It's not what content they produce. It's like that they feel like they have a relationship with this person.
And we actually have done that from day one, like cultivated actual, like I was the guy when we blew up, like there was a bunch of people playing our game. So I used our YouTube account to just actually go leave sincere thanks on everyone. And everyone I did it to, it wasn't just big streamers. It was all the little ones too. They all appreciated it so much that for a while I would comment on every single playthrough of our game and leave like time-stamped remarks so they know I was actually watching and taking notes, and it helped us. It was like free playtesting, free advertisement. And then I think for them, it helped them feel more legitimate that a dev came, which is funny to me because, thanks, man. Like, oh, okay, I'm cool that you got a kick out of me doing that. I'll keep doing it because it's easy and
Yep.
it's a symbiotic. Like
I've done a lot of that with Call of Ragnar too, where I'm like, well, hey, like I'll reach out to some streamers who seem like they're into that same genre, and like we'll set up a time. Why not just have the devs show up and crash a stream one day and just like start talking about like, oh, as you play the demo, here's you can ask all your questions and get direct feedback, and it makes your stream look fucking awesome. And it was really cool. And then,
yeah, it is
everybody
great to jump in.
On both ends appreciated it.
Burleezy played our Walls Closing In as a live thing, and there's like 3,000 people. It felt like a movie premiere because, like, as game developers, I didn't like YouTubers or streamers playing games before I started making them. Not that I hated them, I had no reason. I game, so I'd never watched anyone. But then once we started making games, and I started watching these people, I'm like, oh wow, they do such a big service to us. Not only are they giving us feedback and advertising, but they're enabling us to live our own experiences. Like, I can't play my game and feel like, but I can watch someone else and live vicariously through them. Like, their fear, I'm not going to be scared of what we make. We made it. I made that song. That song isn't going to surprise me, but seeing someone else, I'm scared for them, I guess. So yeah, that was really cool. Those live streams are always cool. Feels like a premiere, like I was saying. It's yeah.
And they're using their brand to expose yours to people who otherwise might not have seen it. And
that's why huge. I brought them in. I brought them in because they're funny. Like like someone like Dom Plays or Burleezy, they both read some stuff for us and it's hilarious. I know you and the Loser Podcast and Kyle, who's been a voice actor with us forever. I write these scripts and I'm like, is it funny? I don't know if it's going to read until someone else reads it. And then I'm like, okay, this sounds legitimate. Like, I'm not a hack.
Well, this is like one of the questions you asked me the other night was like, does it sound like natural? I'm like, well, no, it doesn't at all. It sounds like GTA radio. It doesn't sound like
it should sound like
that. I guess I was talking to you about like Coast to Coast AM. Right?
I didn't know that. That's really cool that they got him. I like getting cameos. I hit up one of those criminal psychology YouTubes to do a cameo, doing a psychological breakdown of the slasher. It was going to be on the radio, but they never responded.
Dude, you should get one of the like the makeup horror story girls. You know what I'm talking about? Oh, this is a whole thing on YouTube. My wife loves this shit. I don't get it. It's not my thing, but there's a whole kind of like community of women who like to tell true crime stories while they do their makeup or something like that.
Okay, it's interesting.
And so it's like the time frame is like, how long does it take me to put on my makeup? And they're telling like sometimes I've gotten sucked into a few because like I like true crime. I think everybody does to some extent. But yeah, like those kinds of people have huge audiences and also might be really good for that kind of content too.
It's interesting. It's kind of like creepy pastas and pastas, whatever, in a way that's like, it's kind of like the new form of urban legends. It's like our generation or the generation under us. I'm millennial. Millennials and Gen Z, probably Gen X to an extent, we have a different method of urban legends. It's like viral stories on the internet, which is fine. It's interesting. Or SPC, SCP, whatever that's called.
Yeah, secure control, whatever. Yeah,
we had SCP collaborate. No,
we had SCP Blackout at Realms Deep last year. Mahalik, he worked on
He did some
Dread X.
Yeah, I remember him. He's cool.
He did the first one, The Outsiders. That one was really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. A lot of twists in that one. And a nice atmosphere. I liked all those Dread X games are cool. I like those because it was a lot of different indie developers, and it's cool to see, all of us just, all right, let's make something quick. And to make games in just a week is crazy. But I will say for Dread X 2, we did not keep the confines. I worked on that game until it was released. I just kept adding more stuff to the end of days. Because I think the second time around we weren't, but Car Thank, we made it like strict. We stopped. We actually there was a part in Carthank, like an intro sequence where you walk into the tomb.
Mm-hmm.
You're like in this weird alien world. It's kind of like Alien or something. And we got
Very
rid of that.
Giger. Yeah.
Yeah, I was pissed we got rid of that. It really set the stage. A lot of people were confused with that game, and I think the whole intro sequence with there was this cool song, and they designed they didn't like the map they made, and they're crazy because it was sick. They're like, oh, this isn't good. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is awesome. This sets everything up perfect. I guess I'm like the guy that's always like, this is great, and they're like, yeah, I don't know, man. But it's funny.
Carthank in general was just like weird.
We needed a little more time to polish it, is all. I think for 7 days, I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
And the platforming was a little wonky because I think we just needed to extend the platforms a little and it would have been fixed. I'm really proud of the soundtrack I made for that game. The Egyptian sci-fi type Byzantine stuff was really, really fun to make. One of the best theme songs I've made is for that. And then there's some cool pause music too that I actually put binaural beats in. So if you listen to it, it puts you in some state that's like uncomfortable. One of the theta or data delta, I forget which one it is.
So I would like to take some time at least out of this interview to discuss like what was your inspiration? What was that moment that made your path go from several different potential things to music? And this is what I want out of my life.
Getting a guitar, but it's funny because I think I was in 6th grade. Me and some friends wanted to start a band, but we didn't play instruments. We just wanted to be like little, like Slipknot, Eminem, basically just like running around like singing edgy lyrics because we were in 6th grade. And they're like, hey, we should all get instruments. And what's funny is I was supposed to get a bass, and I asked for a bass, but I ended up getting a guitar, and I just took to it right away. Like I was writing riffs almost immediately. I didn't really, I had like 1 or 2 lessons and I didn't really like it. They wouldn't teach me metal. So I'm like, I don't want to learn Greensleeves. Of course, now I realize, now I realize all that was really important. Mary Had a Little Lamb, that was the foundation. That I think that was that was the first fucking, I don't even remember how to play it now, but
learn how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb by Stevie Ray Vaughan. Yeah. That's a fucking banger.
That's where it leads. But yeah, so the guitar was the start. And then when I was saying I made a rock opera, that was the kind of the start of Scythe in 2005-ish. That was actually composed on guitar tablature software because it was beyond the capabilities I had on a keyboard. And then I remember I remember sitting in the room making that music and thinking to myself, I can't wait to be able to play this one day. Just the music I was writing was beyond my abilities on piano. And now I'm like at that point where I want to make that album, but we're too busy. We're just constantly working. So, but what's funny about the whole history is throughout my life, everyone's like, that sounds like video game music. Every time I like made an album or a song, I'd show them, yeah, it sounds like video game music, man. And it's just funny I ended up in that field because it was like everyone knew it. Like, that sounds like Final Fantasy. I'm like, I still have not played a Final Fantasy game, but I can't tell you how many times people say your music sounds like Final Fantasy. I'm like, oh, I take that as a compliment, and I've never played the games. I'm sure they have great soundtracks because that's a classic series. I've heard bits and pieces. I've like went and listened. I'm like, oh wow, that's a fucking huge compliment. Thanks.
What made you want a guitar in the first place, though?
But we were starting the band.
Yeah, but why? Like, why did you want to start a band? That's what I'm like.
Because we were really big fans of Slipknot and like new metal at the time. We were, and then once I got the guitar, I kind of gravitated away towards it. This actually ties in really well. During this game, I actually made a bunch of different albums, and one of them was a new metal album, like that style. So I went back to the childhood music I listened to, like all that stuff, like System of a Down, Slipknot, even the ones I didn't really listen to, like Korn or Linkin Park or Limp Bizkit, the ones that my sister was more into. And then Slipknot was my favorite at the time. And I had this feud with another band in 6th grade where like they kicked me out because they're like, I wanted to get a little too old Maiden with it. So they kicked me out. And then I just disavowed Slipknot. Like, fuck them, fuck your new metal. And then as an adult, when I listen back, I'm like, why did I disavow this genre? It's really fun. And especially Slipknot. They're like fucking sick. I'm like, I don't remember them having riffs this nasty. And I'm like, why did I stop listening to this band for 14 years? I should have continued. I don't know. They were a lot better than I remember. It was really good to go back and listen to all that music. It was fun to Marilyn Manson and like Rob Zombie and just all these. The lyrics is what makes it corny to me. It's just like I was like going. It was like we were all like the angry puberty, like I hate homework. Like it's just that stage of life at the time when it was big. So the lyrics are just so corny now as an
People
adult.
equal shit.
Yeah, people equal shit, or like Limp Bizkit, like break stuff. Yeah, it's just like yeah, when you're like 14.
I still love Limp Bizkit. I don't care.
Me
What
too.
anybody
Me too.
says.
Like I said, I went and listened to all that new metal. I'm like, this is awesome, and I made like an 11 song album out of it, and like it was really fun to go back.
It's okay. So that's a good route in, I guess. Like, so new metal.
But then in that was 6th grade, 7th grade, I heard like Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Ozzy, and I went old school metal, and that kind of defined progressive rock. Anything progressive, like I think Deep Purple's the greatest band of all time, and I say that with a completely straight face. Everyone shits on them. It's like listen to their discography. No one comes close. Like a
Space
Frank
Truckin',
Zappa.
come on, you know.
Like Frank Zappa is like probably one of the most like the way he went into different genres of music. But what I like about Purple is it's still accessible to people that aren't master musicians. Like they are very technical, but they can reel it back in. And like to me, they're the perfect blend of technicality, speed, genre mashups. They basically started every element of metal I like, because I think them, Black Sabbath, and Led Zeppelin kind of they're like the 3 bands that really got metal kicked off.
Yeah, I would throw like
A bunch
the
of
Who and Blue Cheer.
Uriah Heep. Yeah, Blue Cheer is good. And like Gentle Giant, Jethro Tull.
Vanilla Fudge.
Yeah. There's a lot of bands.
MC5.
Budgie. There's a lot of bands that just kind of live in the shadows of just Sabbath and Zeppelin. And even Deep Purple's one of them. But like to me, they brought speed and classical influences. They brought all the stuff I like. They brought that cinematic. Their music sounds like a movie almost, and that's what I like is progressive music that takes you on a journey. So as far as writing, that's what I always did with every song I've ever wrote. It's supposed to be a little journey. Even the guitar solo is a journey and a journey. There's a narrative there to every song, I guess.
Yeah, Purple's definitely. It's one of those that just they don't come up enough when you start talking about like the origins of metal music and stuff, because people are always like Black Sabbath is obviously number one, and then Led Zeppelin.
The heavy riffs, they brought the horror and the doom and the sludge, and then Zeppelin was kind of like the cock rock, like bluesy. But I don't know, like Richie Blackmore and John Lord are just so sick, like and their interplay, and they were the band that jammed live. Like they'd take Lazy and play it for 20 minutes, and they're doing all these crazy solos. So it's just like that's what I want to see. If I'm going to a live show, I want to see something different. I don't want to see you play your album note for note. I want to see you take your songs. That's why I like the jam scene. The bands I was in, more history. When I was in bands, we'd write these short little songs, and then we'd extend them to 15 minutes live. And every time we played it, it was different, based on the route, and that was the funnest. I want to start a band when all this pandemic shit's over. I would love to, and tour and do all that again on the side. It'd be great.
When I was like 19-ish, I had a job, like just a job where I was doing event security, and
that's fun. That's always fun.
I got the chance to work for a lot of concerts and shit, and a couple of them that really stood out to me was like one was Dave Matthews Band, which I was never a Dave Matthews guy.
His band rips. I'm not a big fan either, but his band is sick and they jam.
Yeah, like that's what they are, like the kings of like that hippie jam band shit, like Widespread Panic, those kinds of.
Oh, Widespread's sick. Yeah,
and
they were funny
like
on Squidbillies.
Yeah, it was an eye-opening experience getting to see like that
a band cut loose.
Yeah, which I'd seen in a lot of stuff, but like metal bands don't really do that as much. They're very kind of like go out there, play the songs, even if it's like Slayer, that famously like never plays the same guitar solo twice. That I don't think they ever wrote down a note. They're just like, let's just noodle on this bitch and see what happens. Like hit the whammy bar.
The death clock joke there with the I don't read music. Yeah. Do you? And he's just like, no, I just hit any note. It's the oldest trick in the book. It's like, yeah, pretty much.
And then But the other ones were like I saw a lot of country bands because this is in like South Alabama. So like Brad Paisley was one who
I'm
again
sure they rip too. They have some.
not a big fan of him, his commercial music. Yeah, but he's like one of the greatest guitar players ever, and he's like a very like Jerry Reed school, like country bluegrass guitar player. And yeah, his live band was incredible. Like wow, I never even thought that country music could do this.
See, I like the closest to country I get is I like spaghetti western soundtracks. To me,
Oh,
that's the
dude, Ennio
pinnacle of
Morricone.
Ennio
Oh,
Morricone. Like his music is just so incredible. That's why I got that baritone, is just to make spaghetti western music. And I was gonna do a whole. We actually had an unreleased FPS, and I did this whole spaghetti western synth soundtrack to it. And it's one of the albums you can collect in Burger Farm. It's from the unreleased game. It's like these 12-minute big western scores, but I love that genre.
do
There's
you
not
know
enough
the
bands doing that.
do you know the YouTuber Vince Steele? Oh, he will very likely be editing this video because he's like does a lot of the editing for In the Keep. But he's amazing. He's like one of the best like video essayists, I guess you'd call them. I know, which is why I reached out to him in the first place. I'm like, can I like pay you to do some editing for me, bro? But he he and I got into an argument, discussion, I should say, not really an argument. It's not like we're going to rip
Debate.
each other's hair out. Yeah, a friendly debate about country music recently because I mean, I grew up around country music. Like that's
There's like
all you
outlaw
hear.
stuff that's a lot cooler, and it's kind of in that it all kind of sounds spaghetti to me. Like the Johnny Cash shit sounds like a cowboy movie. That's the kind of country I'll get
Yeah,
into, not the pop stuff or the
Waylon
rap country.
Jennings to me was like he's the GOAT. Like him, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson,
Yeah. I
Merle
love I love
Haggard.
that moment in Red Dead 2
Yeah,
where what song is it that they play when you're
is it
John again?
on the road again?
No, not on the road again. It was something else. Was it on the No, it wasn't on the road again. The Cruel Cruel World.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That
Okay.
part was so fantastic. I played it twice. Music and video games, there's always these moments that are like, and they can really elevate like a scene.
Games are like the most complete
Art medium, right?
collaboration of different art forms all into one thing. You can mix film, animation, music, everything all into one place. And because it's in a virtual world, you can very easily do things that aren't possible in the real world. And I think that's what really makes it so special. Like you can only do
Speaking
so
to
much with a
that,
film.
yeah, it's not immersive in the same fashion. Like they're very individual experiences. I wonder if the future of gaming might be some sort of mass, like a movie theater type environment, but for like a war game. So like you all go into a theater and like have your own like chunk of screen that you're watching or something like that, or some sort of live type environment
It's already starting to happen.
with conventions and type stuff.
One of my good friends, I Kill Pigeons is what he goes by, but he does live plays in VR, and people like pay for a ticket, sit down, with their VR headset on, like they're in a real theater, and then they watch these guys do these like really cool plays, like they did Back to the Future. They did,
Very Demolition Man.
yeah, but then with the stage props, they can go crazy. Like at the ending scene where like the DeLorean flies out, it goes straight through the crowd.
Well,
And
did you
like
see how they make Mandalorian? Did you watch the behind the scenes?
I can't. I pay for the Disney app. I refuse.
The Mandalorian, yeah, I don't blame you. That actually, I mean, if we want to talk about inspiration for the game, Happy is totally like Disney. Um, the Mandalorian, how they make it though, they have like this big, like, it's like they make it in Unreal, all the scenes, and they can alter it live as the people are on the set. So I
They have like
just,
giant LED screens, right? Behind
yes,
them.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's like instead of green screens, it's LED screens. Like that must put the actor in the environment so much more.
That must be a very interesting challenge for the cameramen to, light.
Well, it isn't, because like with Unreal, they have all this, and we use Unity 3D, but Unreal, they have all these the ability to just control everything. So no matter where you're getting it, you can just make the light go where it needs to, and it's very intuitive filmmaking. Like if we get a game studio, I hope someday I want to buy like a whole set like that and start doing short films in the Scythe universe that'll supplement. Start releasing, you know, these like hardcover novels again that we used to do. And like, oh, it's a blank page. You can't see anything here. Caleb did all this artwork, and I did all the writing. And we had this other guy that would kind of give the synopsis, and then I just kind of write a novel off it. And maybe someday we'll start bringing that back, because there's a lot of stuff to unpack with Happy's Humble. So I'm sure people will be asking all kinds of questions about the lore. Back to music if you have anything more. Sorry, I go off.
No, you talk about whatever you want, man. I was actually just going to respond kind of to your... With Happy's, like, this is going to be kind of one of your first, like, more commercial products, right? Where you're going to have a lot more people. You have, money behind it and everything. And I think stuff like that is going to be very important to people. Even especially in the boomer shooter community, people love the big box releases and stuff, things. I guess it's like a nostalgia thing because back in the 90s you'd get those like really cool big box things, and I don't know why I don't really have a lot of interest personally in that. Like, I just want to play the game, but people really value that shit.
I really like this wave of boomer shooters. Or like someone like Puppet Combo or Germ Food, like all these developers that are taking that aesthetic from my childhood, which is like, what we do, and then like improving it. Like a game like Ion Fury just looks just so incredible. It's like, oh, if they continued just to stay in these graphics, this is what it would look like now. And it's just so cool. It's like growing. I mean, I'm an interesting age group, and you're pretty much right there with me in that. When I was young, the graphics were Nintendo. And then when I got now at 32, I'm making games, and the graphics they were unheard of when I was growing up. So it's very interesting to grow up with an art medium and then join into it, I guess. So, like start making stuff in it.
I remember like kind of the moment when because I never really thought about graphics. It was not like the most important thing, and it still isn't to me. But I remember playing Uncharted on my PlayStation.
I love that series. 2 is one of the greatest ever. Uncharted 2.
So my grandparents' living room, I'm like sitting in the floor, like in front of like this sideways couch with the PlayStation plugged up, and I'm playing Uncharted. And then at some point I realized like my granddad was watching this, and he actually believed that he was watching a movie. He didn't realize that I was playing a game.
They're engrossing. They totally
his eyesight's not what it used to be, I guess, but like it's very like that. I didn't realize how
you must have not died for a while.
Yeah.
You were crushing it. You were on a good run.
It's a pretty cinematic game in general.
Oh, definitely.
Like it's
really
got a
good
lot
at that.
Cutscenes and that kind of stuff.
The second one just is. I like all. Well, I think how many did I play? 3 or 4? I don't even remember.
I think I played 1, 2, and 3.
Was there a 4th?
Yeah, there was.
And that was the one that was I played all 4. I think 2 was my favorite. The one that starts on the train that's hanging off the cliff. It's just like all the set pieces were so crazy. It was like this awesome Indiana Jones, The Mummy, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider type mix.
Yeah,
really good stuff. But hey, that's why I make games and why you interview devs, because you can just bring up a game like that and just be like, oh shit, like that was the fucking coolest shit ever.
It's interesting how like different people kind of draw inspiration from different places. So like I could talk to you and we could go on a whole tangent about Uncharted, but like there are some people, especially like the kind of boomer core, old graphics, like this is, they're very, and I'm not say elite about it, but I mean like
they have a niche.
I have no room for anything else, and I don't want to talk about, I don't play that stuff. I don't look at it. You never know. Like
we're very, like I was saying, the whole point of Scythe is to be able to take any subgenre of horror or fantasy, sci-fi, action, and have fun with it and make it our own. Like, there's the big reveal that I alluded to is a whole new form of enemy in fiction. Like it's never been done. What we're building up to is something. Well, I think there's shades of it in other. It's like a new kind of zombie, a new kind of that sort of thing. Like how zombies, when George Romero brought them in, were new. We have our own version of that. We have our own thing that I've never heard used in anything else. That's really cool. And we've been hinting at it from day one, so some people have kind of caught on to it.
That might be an interesting transitioning point to talk about, because you said you wanted to talk about movies and stuff too, and
The big inspiration point for us.
yeah,
For sure.
Romero, not John Romero, who is very important, I guess, to
Oh
this
yeah,
audience, but
just
George
as
Romero.
important. George Romero is what I was talking about. Yeah, but they're
Yeah.
both obviously legends in their own fields.
So like there was lots of zombie stuff. There was like White Zombie, not the band, but the film stuff before that. But the zombie mythos was fundamentally changed by George Romero.
Yeah, it was voodoo, and then like post Romero, George Romero, post George Romero, I feel like the only voodoo zombie movie that made an impact was Serpent and the Rainbow. But I think that was a Wes Craven movie. And it was more about politics than it was about zombies. It was the guy trying to get, and that movie is fucking sick. That movie was so intense. I love when he gets off the plane. He's just like, I'm back. And they just immediately arrest him. He's like, that's a scary movie because it's like, that can happen. Like if you're like traveling overseas and even if someone happened to them here in America, like that's being in a foreign place that you're not aware of where you are and you're trying to fuck with things you shouldn't be. That's terrifying. That's a great movie. Very intense.
I really resonate with that era, of horror in general, especially
the 80s.
I would say pre 80s, right?
Or like 70s,
late
60s.
70s, even some into the 60s.
Black Christmas.
I have no issue. I think the 80s horror movies are cool too, but there's a change in the industry that happens where in the 70s, a lot of like real like avant-garde directors were making horror movies, right? Like you have like Stanley Kubrick making horror movies. You have the
Rosemary's Baby, The
Rosemary's
Exorcist,
Baby was
Texas
a great
Chainsaw
one.
Massacre, Halloween. You're talking about that.
Yeah. Like
yeah, I definitely agree. Those are like if you rewatch Halloween and just really pay attention, like Michael Myers is hiding behind you, and like every single fucking scene of the movie, he's somewhere like driving a truck or like. And I didn't notice that when I was a kid.
The Exorcist, even was another great example.
Very intense, very intense movie.
And then in the 80s, technology changed, and suddenly, like 79 or late 70s is when Evil Dead comes out, and this is like one of the first times when a super like low budget movie was able to be produced.
Incredible, yeah.
Right. And so people realized, and with the changing technology, that it was possible to make a pretty damn good horror movie, even if it's campy and shit, with a really, really low budget. And it changed from these super duper big star directors to suddenly you just have a bunch of shit turning out, and a lot of it's crap and a lot of it's fantastic. So then we end up with like Halloween inspires these slasher films. And
I love the slasher genre. Clearly, that's what Northbury Grove trilogy was all about.
Yeah, Friday the 13th, essentially, and that kind of stuff.
One, like we are like, we're into like Maniac and Black Christmas, just real obscure shit. The Burning, like, and then also like, I think I'm very particular to Halloween because I'm a John Carpenter fanatic, and I think his soundtracks really elevate. And I like Michael Myers. That was the first slasher I saw. But like I rewatched Texas Chainsaw recently, the first one, and that's a fucking intense movie. Or Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, like that's another fucking fantastic movie.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like people think of it as like it's just like super gory.
Not at all. It's a slow burn for like almost the entire movie, and that's really sets the stage. It's that juxtaposition that makes it work.
It's one of the most beautifully filmed movies I think I've ever seen.
Great cinematography.
Like, you pay attention to like the camera work. You're like, wow, this is amazing.
The Hitcher from the 80s. Very underrated. Duel. I like Maximum Overdrive. I think that if we were to ever get like some licensing deal to make some big franchise, I'd love to do a Maximum Overdrive game. That'd be very fun. I think I wanted. It's funny because we brought up AC/DC. I always wanted to get a copy of that movie without their music, so I could redo it as a horror synth soundtrack and see how different the movie would feel.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to like this movie as scored by, and then just change the soundtrack and see if you could. Because I bet you could fundamentally change the story.
Oh, definitely. Those are
playing with the music.
There was a George A. Romero movie called Survival of the Dead, and the soundtrack was very Danny Elfman. Tim Burton-y, like it felt like a Tim Burton movie, and it turned it into a comedy. And like a lot of people didn't like that movie. I'm like, it's shot pretty good. I think a darker soundtrack would elevate it a lot and do a good job. Because like, I mean, John Harrison did Day of the Dead, and his music was incredible for Day of the Dead 85 or whatever. And then Dawn of the Dead obviously had Goblin do a lot of the score, and that was sick. Just that heartbeat, bump, 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 and just all the crazy moogs. I think that's why I like the 80s horror so much, because the music perhaps was peaking. I know how you're saying, like, it used to be, it got a little schlocky, it got cheesier for sure, but the soundtracks were really peaking in terms of like cool.
It's not that I don't like cheesy slasher movies or anything.
I know what you're saying. Like,
yeah.
I agree with you. Like, the more grindhousey horror has more impact, at least. But I like cheese too, you know. Scythe is very cheesy. I think there's two forms of art. There's like corny and there's cheesy. And the best way for me to describe it is like grunge rock is kind of corny and 80s metal is kind of cheesy. And like they're both valid. And sometimes people like both, sometimes people only like one. But they're both great.
I mean, you can mix the two. You know, you can have a little cheese on your corn if that's what you're into. I don't think that would taste very good, but
I'm sure it's out there. It's probably deep fried.
Yeah.
If it's, you know, somewhere in America at least.
Somewhere in Nebraska. But it's such a huge thing that's influenced a lot of the music because, as you said, the music really peaked with those slasher films in a lot of ways. And just even, Disaster Piece, he did It Follows soundtrack.
I've heard that name before.
Rich Freeland. There's also a song by Slipknot called Disaster Piece, which is
that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. I was just I was trying to place that.
He's amazing. I mean, I'm a huge fan.
I've heard that soundtrack's really good. I haven't seen It Follows yet, but I listened to some clips and it was sick. You know, we were in the synthwave scene, so we saw Kung Fury blow up. I did the soundtrack to Lieutenant Jangles, this awesome Australian comedy. Mm-hmm. Not the whole sound.
I've heard that one, by the way. I've listened to everything that I'm aware of you publishing. Like,
oh, nice. Thank you.
I put your shit on like Spotify at work and just terrorize people. What are you listening to? I was like, I don't know, but this guy's awesome.
Well, people like it.
Yeah, people generally like because I'm like the weird music guy. Like in the office that I work in, like I'm the only one who just like listens to like weird off the wall shit.
See, all my shit's instrumental, so it is weird. I mean, I'm trying out different genres, as you probably noticed, like dubstep, psytrance. I don't stick to one thing. I try to be unique in that fashion, but it is cool that I've never had singing until I got the Pokemon singer, Jason Page. Like that's the first song I've ever had vocals done. Like 400 plus songs in, we got him for. And I just wanted to say how, like, I did a conference with him and we talked, and I was just like, yeah, what I'm going for is like, this is like one of the biggest things in the world, which, you know, ironically, he sang for the biggest thing in the world because Pokemon is the biggest thing. It's bigger than anything else.
Which I didn't original know. Pokemon theme song, like that's. I can walk downstairs right now and start singing it, and my wife is going to jump up out of the couch and start like duetting it with me.
I've covered that at a concert before, you know, and like. He hit us back right away. And after the conversation, he's like, well, what are you looking for? I'm like talking about like, I like 80s Deep Purple with Joe Lynn Turner. He's like, I know Joe, he's a friend of mine or something. Like, it was just crazy. We were just talking about all this shit. And I'm just like, I really like Bat Out of Hell, Meatloaf. He's like, I was on Bat Out of Hell 3. Like I was one of the backing singers.
What? Like, that's...
Yeah. So I'm like, so basically, and then I told him this, I'm like, I kind of want like a Slaves and Masters era Deep Purple is how I'm going to go at it with the music. I wanted to have Meatloaf, Jim Steinman-esque backing vocals, which he did. He already provided the actual official thing for Bat Out of Hell 3, which Desmond Child produced. So that's another seminal. And then obviously, like, you know, the best theme song ever, your song. Just do that. And then like I made a song that day and sent it to him. And I was like, nice. He's going to be like, wow, you started that from scratch. But then he sent vocals like the next day himself, and they were like pretty polished. Like we both finished that song in like 2 days and then polished it for like a month. But there's a version that's really early that we each worked one session on, and it sounds pretty legit. That early version, that uncut draft, that really before the backing vocals and all that, sounds like a legit song already. But yeah, he crushed it. He wrote all the lyrics. He sang. I gave him complete creative control. I told him the story, and he just took it and made it perfect. You know. And it was really cool to have him on board. But he's a great singer, you know. It's really cool to have him.
That's amazing. How old is he now?
I have no idea, but he's been on everything. Like, yeah. My whole purpose with that though is I want people to play this game and think that it actually is about something. Like I want them to be like, oh, I want to go watch the Happy Humble Heifer anime or get the comic book. Like it
Yeah.
actually exists. Yet we made it all for the game. So I mean, I guess something similar, and this happens to us often. And this happened to me my whole life. You hear about stuff that is similar to you after you've made it. And then like you go look at it, you're like, oh, sick. Like I never heard of Bendy and the Ink Machine until we were making the first Happy Humble. And then people are comparing it to FNAF and Dark Deception and all these games with killer mascots. Whereas I was thinking of Chuck E. Cheese and McDonald's Grimace. Like we were thinking of our childhood. And then I went and looked at all those games and they're cool. And I looked at Bendy and like, oh, I could totally see how people could compare the two. Like I like those. After looking at them all, I'm totally fine being in the camp with them. They're all cool. They have a similar vibe, a similar vision of satirizing Disney or Looney Tunes or, whatever. But yeah, I like that aspect, it gives us a lot to the lore.
Yeah. I never really thought about the mascots of McDonald's playing into this, but yeah, I remember watching do you remember those McDonald's cartoons?
Yeah,
They were like,
exactly.
They go to Grimace Island or like a haunted house and
it's creepy. Especially the old 70s live action like costumed guys.
Oh,
and there's like pirates and characters that didn't carry over into the 90s cartoons, but that and Chuck E. Cheese, like I used to go to Chuck E. Cheese as a kid. So that was another inspiration point. Just that weird, creepy animatronic band.
So there's you should probably watch this one. There's a horror movie about the banana splits.
I heard about Nicolas Cage, right?
I don't think Nicolas Cage is in it.
No, that's the other one that they did. He just did one that was about mascots, and I know what you're talking about. The Banana Splits is like a slasher movie with the mascots, right?
Yeah, it's like about this kid and his, for his birthday, his family takes him to go see the Banana Splits like TV recording. But then they okay, well, a few people are going to want to pass to stay after the show. But then it turns out all the robots are like, programmed murdering machines or whatever. So it's a fun little stupid slasher movie. It was a few years ago, something like that.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, there's a lot of it's a weird thing. Like those are one of those really oddly creative little subgenres that have come out of somebody having this shared experience of those are supposed to be cool and fun for kids, but they're actually fucking creepy and terrifying and weird. And
it's not just mascots too, because I think we're closer to games like there's a whole little subgenre about just working a weird shift, like you're saying.
Yeah,
it's not necessarily just mascots, like that Night Shift game that Puppet Combo did, and then like Night of the Consumers from Germ Food. There's some other burger game called Meat on itch.io, and he had a really cool art style, kind of looked like the Gorillas. I think he hand draws it.
Overcooked, the Nintendo game. You know what I'm talking about?
No, but I know there's a lot of cooking isn't really my genre. That's why I'm the guy that's like, all right, it should be a conspiracy game about simulations and working all this weird shit into it. So, but now that they designed it, like the way they designed the gameplay, it's actually very fun to cook, in my opinion. Like to act like a ninja, go, and you actually can pick up 4 things in the full version now, so you can just throw everything on the sandwich at once.
That was a huge pain in the ass when I first played the demo. It was like I have to run back and forth with like cheese, okay, lettuce. This is retarded, but it's still
because the game it's a stress. It's like stress.
And that's what I assumed was the kind of the idea of it, was that it's supposed to be unrealistically stressful.
But you got to balance that stress in a way that's fun, and that's what we did. That's how we updated the game for the full version. It's the scares playing to the gameplay, and these are notes from like our producer Ryan from Tiny Build and Alex himself, the CEO. Like they're a very helpful company. They gave us really good insight on how to improve without hampering our creative energy at all. And it was smart to release that alpha. It's like a whole game on its own. I don't even consider them the same. Like the alpha is a game, a free game on its own. It's a self-contained story, and the full game is just the next upgrade.
Right.
So it's the trilogy, like I was saying earlier. But I think, like you're saying, it's really stressful to run and grab cheese, run and grab this. To be able to grab 4 things, it makes it more stressful in a realistic way, because that wasn't realistic. You wouldn't be able to grab a bunch of stuff. So now that you can grab 4, I think you'll like the update. It'll be a more realistic stressful for you.
Yeah, maybe I think tomorrow is kind of like my scheduled. I'm giving myself a day off, and I'll just sit down and play all the fucking demos that I've been meaning to play.
How many did you get?
Dude, don't even. Like, it's a lot. Too many. Some of them are self-imposed, or some of them are like, oh, that looks really interesting, I'm going to play that, and then it doesn't work out. But
so what's the deal with the live event
with
Realms Deep?
What do you mean, what's the deal with it?
Is there a live component as well, like a convention type thing, or was there pre-COVID?
So last year, 2020, was the first time that it had ever been done. So it was kind of a learning experience for everybody involved. Fred had this kind of vision about it. Essentially, it's just like a scheduled event where we're taking all of the different trailers, like premieres from 3D Realms and New Blood or whatever, all the companies that are kind of under this umbrella. Or Running with Scissors did some stuff last year where I actually went to Mike J's office and killed him. It was like a whole thing. Nice. It was like a little vignette video that was the premiere of the Postal Brain Damage trailer.
That's cool. So it's kind of like a bit of an award show vibe, or like how they do funny skits, or like an E3 type thing that's just done digitally.
And then there's contests going on in the chat, and then every so often it'll pan back to the studio where it's like Fred and Alex and all the 3D Realms people are hey, what's going on? We're just all drinking this Monster Energy. Haha, we're sponsored by Monster. Boomer Juice. Okay. And here's the next thing is going to be Ty's interview with John Romero. Here we go. I didn't actually, I was supposed to interview John Romero, but I was asleep when he had time. And so Jahar from Tasty Spleen did it in my absence.
You got stuck with John at the shred.
No, I mean, if I were to pick anybody ever to do my podcast without me, Jahar is my guy. He's my hero. Love him. Please do. And he probably knows more about 90s Doom shit than I do even. So fine. But so this year is going to be, people hearing this podcast will have just seen the event. So
yeah, we're doing this
it's fun. They'll probably want to know some behind the scenes shit. But last year was 2 days of streaming. I think this year we're going to do one big day of the stream with, probably with us hosting it. And then we'll have a separate day called where we're going to kind of slowly reveal all this stuff. But the vault will be how people find this interview most likely, where it's okay, you saw the show, and then here's a bunch of related content about a lot of the games that you just saw. So, you saw trailers yesterday. Today will be, long form interviews with the people who made these games. It will be things that were like behind the scenes games. I think a few people are planning on doing a gore panel, just different games that were showing off that how they do their different gore systems. We're going to do sick. Behind the music of Call of Sir Ragnar, that kind of shit. That's the plan.
Hit me up. I can give you a little behind the scenes footage of a DAW capture or something.
I already did.
I'll send you no, I'm saying after I'll send you footage from inside the software, so you can splice it in or something.
I'll
right where we're saying this, you could splice it over.
I don't think these long form podcasts are going to be super overproduced like that.
But, okay, no worries.
Yeah, but I would love to, if you just shoot a video behind the scenes of how you make your music or whatever, you're more than welcome to submit it.
Yeah, if you need anything like that, just hit me up,
Yeah.
Making jingles and all that.
And we've touched on this a little bit, but you work across so many different genres, especially in this game, right? With Happy's, you've done several different albums where you're doing very different styles of music. And you're not necessarily always going to be a fan of every single one of these different styles of music, but
actually am. I think I think every music genre has good in it. Even the genres I don't really care too much for, like a mumble rap, which I don't really care for, I can find value in the beats, and I can also respect the rappers because it's actually hard to do. I just don't like how it sounds. It's It sounds too
Yeah.
much like tattletaling to me. Mom, that's how it sounds to me. But the actual skill it takes to constantly rap in triplets is actually pretty intense, and the beats are sick. Here's what I think. I think every music genre has really cool shit that people just don't hear because all they hear is the mainstream. So it's
Yeah.
like you never dig deep. You're not going to like country if you don't find the country you enjoy. You're not going to like metal if you don't like screaming and never find the metal that's operatic vocals. You know what I mean? It's all about just research, I guess. But so I actually enjoy working on all these different genres um, quite a bit. It's challenging, you know. You're kind of like making music in a style you've only listened to. Uh, like by the time you finish an album, you've made more music than you've heard from the genre. It's like an hour of stuff, and you've listened to 20 minutes of it. I don't know.
I'm imagining though, like that it's kind of like creating challenges for yourself, like see how what you can accomplish. I remember like just kind of watching you on Twitter, and you would kind of reach out to the community, be like, hey, I'm looking to do like some more like 80s hair metal kind of stuff. Can y'all send some inspiration my way? And the stuff that's in the game like is, other than the fact that I know it's used, like kind of indistinguishable from like true, Poison, Rat, Warrant, these kinds of bands that were amazing.
If you were to like, I don't know how many of the albums you collected, would you know that was all one guy, or would you think it's different bands?
I mean, it's kind of hard for me to give an honest opinion because I knew the whole time it was you.
Yeah.
And I knew what you were capable of because I've listened to all your shit. But um, just if I'm just talking about how I feel about it, I would totally believe it if you were like, yeah, we hired a bunch of different people, people who specialize in different genres and put it together. But even then, there's like a little bit of your flavor on it, and that's all tied together by the theme of the game too. Is like your 80s hair metal stuff and your like more hip hoppy kind of sound stuff still feel like John of the Shred, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. My favorite bands do that. Like we were talking about Zappa and like a Deep Purple, and like they always try different genres. And I think that was more of a thing back in like the 70s.
Yeah.
Or like even like a John Carpenter. He's changing genres of film and the music he's making for it. And it's always pretty badass. I guess not musically as different as these other people we're talking about, but like a Zappa, he's doing doo-wop and then he's parodying the Beatles, and it's just like it's so wildly different, but you can tell it's him. So I never like when people say bands sell out, I never was on board with that unless it seemed insincere. Like I didn't think Metallica sold out with the Black album Load and Reload, or even Saint Anger, even though I didn't like Saint Anger.
I don't see how they sold out. Because
me neither. They're just exploring new sounds. You can't just retread the same ground every time. What's wrong with the band exploring new terrain? Like Iron Maiden, they got more proggy, and I'm all for it. They're getting older. Deep Purple, they cover every genre. They went funk in the 70s before they were even well known for hard rock. So like all these bands that constantly challenge themselves, I think it aids in longevity. You don't want to keep making the same thing over and over.
A lot of the bands that are kind of considered by most people to be like these sellout radio rock bands, right? Like, so 3 Days Grace is probably the biggest example I can think of, or like Nickelback, that kind of stuff. I can't really say anything nice about 3 Days Grace, actually.
I don't know anything about those bands, so I can't comment. Like a Nickelback, to me, I don't get why Nickelback gets as much flack as they do. To me, it just sounds like grunge, but in a really expensive studio. It doesn't sound too far off from 90s rock to me.
Genuinely really enjoy a lot of their music. Like, like when I hear like, I don't know.
Like a Puddle of Mud and all those bands to me, they're just post-grunge type. And I don't really have any problem with that.
They just, they got really popular, and obviously then they're like, okay, well, we got to pay the bills. So let's put out like, Rockstar was like the big Nickelback song that blew them into the stratosphere beyond just being on the radio and stuff. And then that's the point where, okay, I can see that they're paying those bills. But then by all accounts, and I've never seen them live, but everybody that I know who has says like, when you see them live, they're doing like metal covers and shit. Like they're doing what they want to be doing. And then they're just
cool.
paying the money, putting their kids in college with this commercial music.
When I was,
who am I to judge? No, go ahead.
I was playing when I was playing hippie festivals. We were in a battle of the bands, and there was this band that like had this whole thing where they were saying like we're spiritually transcending music when you come to us. We're an experience. And I just found it so pretentious, especially because they sold acid to their fan base. So like
That's
if
what
you're
the Grateful
selling,
Dead did.
yeah, but
Literally.
the Grateful Dead weren't that pretentious about it.
I
They were
got you.
just having fun. Like this band was acting like this wasn't a staple in the jam scene. I don't know. It's just their language on their website was ridiculous. It's like we're transcending music, and it's just like, well, for a 12-year-old girl, Britney Spears does that, and you can't dismiss the fact that her music, for some demographics, does the same thing.
I fucking love Britney Spears, dude.
There's
I
just I don't know.
still
There's just no humility to it,
hit
to
me,
say something
baby,
like that.
one more time. Like I play that shit all the time. I love that song.
Well,
Kiss
the
my
Children
ass.
of Bodom cover.
Oh, that's cool too. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I
But
like
I don't
Bodom.
know. It's an art form. Like not everyone's gonna like the same shit, and I don't know. You should be able to appreciate. Like I'm not. If I don't like a video game, I can still understand how much work went into it.
Yeah.
If it's a genre I don't like, I'm not gonna be like, this shouldn't exist. No one else should enjoy this because I don't. Like it's just such a weird mindset.
That's a pretty common like tribalistic teenager. I mean, I remember you were talking about Children of Bodom a couple of minutes ago. I remember, getting into real heated arguments with people about like Children of Bodom, and this is me talking like Children of Bodom sucks. Why do they have keyboards in a death metal band? That's
You
not
were
fucking
saying
metal,
that
bro.
you were cult
And
at one point.
and I'm like
So was I.
me.
I was saying that about Slipknot. Remember?
I'm like Megadeth. Like that was kind of my shit. This really super technical guitar
Yeah,
orientated
Mustaine
thrash metal. Yeah.
rips.
Oh, dude, him and who's the
Ellefson.
David
I never
Ellison?
got into Megadeth, but what I've heard is sick. I like Exodus, and
Yeah, Exodus is cool. Marty
Exodus is
Friedman
probably.
is who I was
Oh yeah,
thinking of.
Friedman is sick too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for thrash, my favorites are like Exodus, Creator from Germany, or just like
Oh yeah.
it's like
Enemy
sick,
of God. That shit is heavy, man.
just that like cinematic thrash metal. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else? Overkill, Nuclear Assault. Metal's so cool. It's so much sick metal.
Jungle
Actually,
Rot.
I should show this off from Kyla Custom Rockwear. Look at this.
Move the dreads out of the way. There we go. Happy's Humble Burger Bar. It's fucking dope, man.
She makes good stuff. She like makes vests for like Chris Jericho and like Alice Cooper and like all these giant bands and stuff. So it's cool. I just saw it online. I'm like, I want something custom for when I stream and like hopefully start a band again.
Yeah.
When all this crap is over, I don't know if
You're
we're
like
gonna be allowed to tour.
representative of like freedom, essentially. Like you look like the free rock and roll guy who never, quote, never grew up or whatever, but you're just doing life your way, which is.
It took a lot of. Here's the thing with artistic jobs. I feel like a lot of people think, like I was saying with the streamers, everyone's just like, oh yeah, they just play video games. It's like, no, it took us forever to build that brand. With like something like music, especially, I think music is the hardest thing to get paid to do. It's like everyone just takes it for granted, but their life would suck so much if it was gone. They'd be like, everything would be bland. Like take music out of like a scene from like most movies, and it'd just be so odd. Like there's movies like No Country for Old Men or like The Birds that had no music, and it was done very well. But I don't think a soundtrack would have ruined those movies. I would like to see them with soundtracks even.
Like, to think of one of those moments that had music in your life, like where you remember that moment because you remember the song that was playing, and then just remove that song from the equation. Be wildly different.
Yeah, especially as someone that has done soundtracks for many games, had music license, toured in a band. Music has kind of been my whole. But yeah, my whole point with that was like people underestimate how, like if it's fun to do, it's not work or something. Sometimes a lot of people have that mindset. Like if you enjoy what you're doing, or even just enjoy the end result of it, if it's an enjoyable thing that results from it, all of a sudden it's not work. It's a similar mindset to something like cannabis, like where like the psychoactive element of cannabis where people get high and can relax. For some reason, it offends people to a point where they deny if there are actual medicinal benefits, which I think there are. We have an endocannabinoid system in our bodies like made to just benefit. I mean, it obviously can be abused too. I'm not saying it cures all, but there's just some people that are adverse to stuff like that. Like, Like, it's not work if it's fun. I don't agree with that, though.
We were talking about Animal Farm earlier, and I think that kind of behavior is very much like chickens self-enforcing their own captivity, right? Like, so if one chicken gets smart and tries to like escape the farm, the other chickens gang up on them and they're like, "Hey, what are you, fucking stupid? The farmer feeds us." Like,
Really?
and then people grow attached to that, like in society in general, especially in the workforce. There's this very strong culture. I used to work in construction. It was like this all the time. Like, don't bite the
Yeah, I
hand that
did
feeds
too.
you. That kind of shit. Like,
OSHA certification is like
yeah,
intense. You're like, it's like a horror movie. You're watching all this gore footage, and it's just like there are more deaths in construction in every year than the military. You're like, really? I didn't know that.
definitely. There's more people in construction than there are in the American military, period.
Yeah.
And there's construction workers in the military too, if you count that. But
it's double intense.
yeah, and then there's all this. There's just this tendency for people to try to justify their own situation.
That's how
most
I think
people
it
are
is.
miserable. Most people fucking hate their jobs.
I think people are self-centered and selfish. I don't think everyone's evil. Like, there's a whole anti-human sentiment throughout culture and society right now, and I'm very much against it. I think we, like, all right, for example, this whole thing where like all these corporations talking down to people like me or you, these regular people, like, you need to stop eating meat because you're ruining the environment. It's like, you took a fucking yacht to give that speech. Like, that the waste that you emitted on your commute to your speech you're talking down to me from accounts for more waste than I do in like years. And like this whole thing, like the carbon footprint of one person, it's like, dude, the carbon footprint of one person of my entire bloodline is less than 1 hour of corporate dumpage in an ocean. So like, don't tell me I need to completely start eating like bug paste and like synthesized human shit to like save the environment that you're ruining. Like, I'm so sick of that mindset. It's like all the blame is being passed from like the elite to the people. And that's kind of the whole, that's how political I get in the game. I'm very humanitarian. I like people. I don't like corporations blaming us for their bullshit. That's a big kind of thing I'm touching on with like the Obscura company, and like their motivations in the game are not the best motivations.
That's the most interesting thing about the game. And I think I kind of touched on this early in this discussion, but the game really sheds a lot of commentary, I should say, on that aspect of society. Like, this corporation is in fact like hiding things and exploiting you, the worker, and making you, I don't know, feel like if you step out of line, something bad will happen to you or whatever.
Turd in the punch bowl.
And I can't understand the mindset of someone who like my grandpa, right? And we get along fine. He's super supportive of everything, but he spent 40 years of his life, probably more than that, working for Shell Chemical at a chemical plant, doing shift work every day.
I think back then it actually benefited you though. You could like afford a house and to feed your family and all that. Our generation doesn't have that. We have to make ourselves. We need to brand ourselves, like you're doing with the podcast and I'm doing with our video games. It's us. We own it. We're the generation that needs to happen because of how much wages stagnated. Like, everyone's just like, the cost of living will shoot up with minimum wage. It's like it did that without minimum wage being raised. They're just fleecing us more and more each eat as much as they can. It's just a downward spiral. But at the same time, the conditions we live in are so much better than even just 100 years ago. So it's a trade-off. Like, as society gets better, we kind of narrow our focus. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes I think people can get a little too religious with it, I guess.
Obviously, there are certain hard jobs that just kind of like for society to function, like, the trash being taken out of big cities.
Yeah, and everyone will shit on them people.
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh, the trash man. Like, what do you mean that job is so noble? They're coming and picking up your shit. And you're going to make fun of them for that? They get paid better than you do, I'm sure, and they deserve that wage.
I would argue that it's unnecessary, right? Like, and we're starting to see this kind of post-COVID as people just moved right the fuck out of cities because the cities are dependent on the infrastructure, right? Like, if you don't have trash collection, sewage, all these different essential services functioning, agriculture, shipping food in, all this stuff, a city cannot function. People will just fucking die. They don't know how to take care of themselves. They're
It's like almost being under siege almost.
It's like being a chicken on a farm. Like if the farmer just stops feeding you, what are you going to do? If they take the fence down and let the coyotes in, what are you going to do? You're fucked. You don't know how to take care of yourself. People who live in rural places, and I'm saying this as somebody who lives currently in a city, right? Like, so this is not me preaching. I'm just making an observation about the way we structure things. But you take somebody like again, my grandpa, like if just the economy shuts down and electricity goes off and everything, he knows how to grow his own food. He knows how to like reach out to someone and be like, hey man, can I borrow your tractor? Yeah, man, you've been taking care of me for years. Let's do that. And like things just go on. People know how to survive. And I think that's a Hank Williams song. But
I'm not confident of the apocalypse. I use technology for everything. If the world shut down, I'd be very annoyed that I couldn't continue making new music. That'd be probably my biggest pet peeve. Fuck, I can't record music anymore.
I had this discussion with, I can't remember who it was, but I was talking about how like pre-recording technology, music was sacred. Like now we just take it all for granted, as you said.
It happened and you were there or you weren't.
You can,
even when recording fidelity was shitty, it was still kind of like that. Like you weren't, you couldn't really hear the orchestra. You weren't there. You're hearing the whole shitty version of it.
Well, you just go on the internet right now and type in a song and hear it right now. No problem.
Like watching a movie on a cell phone. It's not the same.
But if you go back to like the 1400s and the only chance you're going to hear any music is if someone's singing or whistling or carrying an instrument with you, or if you walk into it like a bar and there's a bard who's playing a lute and singing songs, and people valued that so much. That was like one of
everyone
the noble
was more
professions.
musical too.
Yeah,
because there used to be like people would sing together in bars and stuff. To be like jigs, Irish jigs and stuff.
Yeah.
My last name's Riley, so don't worry.
It was like a group activity. It was ritualistic too. I mean, that's part of it. Every ceremony involved.
It's community.
Music.
It's the universal language.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be like dystopian or like anti-progression in any way. I'm sure we'll figure it out again somehow, how to make this new system work for us, maybe, or not, or the apocalypse will happen. But yeah, like music is extremely, extremely valuable, and it does frustrate me. Art in general is valuable, and it does frustrate me that it's so easily accessible that people don't look at it and take it in as much as they maybe used to.
My advice to anyone that's getting into art forms like music is if you're going to do something for free, make sure you're doing it as a barter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like everyone that has like, oh, don't do anything for free. Well, don't get ripped off. It's more like it. Like if someone can help start a team, that's what I did. We weren't paying each other. We were all making games for free and releasing them. And then when we made money, we split it as we all worked just as hard as the next guy. So, you got to find people you can really work with long term that have the same work ethic and same morals, but also different tastes so that you can make something new when you meet in the middle of what you all like. Because we all play games very differently. Like I think Blake is a guy that tries to break games. I'm a guy that likes to take the story in. And I'm not sure what Caleb does. I think he probably thinks about how to make it when he plays it. And it's like kind of the same thing with the band. If you have different instrumentalists from different backgrounds, like a jazz funk bassist and a metal drummer, that alone is going to get you a whole different sound than most other bands. So long as you respect each other's influence and meet in the middle of it.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to leave it off. That's like kind of the overall arcing message, kind of
especially for Scythe.
You guys are kicking ass, and it's beautiful to see that you're all pursuing your passion together, like and really finally now really starting to see hopefully the fruits of that effort.
Likewise to you with the podcasts and helping put on this sick event that's got all these awesome game developers. Good luck to everyone watching this and all the people making video games or wanting to. Just keep fucking trucking.
Space trucking.